Hey, welcome, everybody. Welcome this morning. I know we have people joining. Come on in. We're excited to have you here at the first part of a two-part summit on change management. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stuart Ambrose. I'm going to be your virtual MC today as we proceed through the program. Before we start, a few quick ground rules. So due to the size of the event, we'll have, depending on the time period today, about 60 to 80, 90 people on today. We're going to ask, generally speaking, keep yourselves on mute unless somebody wants you to come off. But we always love seeing your faces, so it makes it feel a little like more like a live event if we can see you with your cameras on. But if you need to turn your camera off, that's okay too. No problem. You do you. I recommend also, due to the nature of this and the size of this, that you maybe want to come off of grid view and do this on the speaker view, that you can do that so that you can see, or spotlight view, I forget what they call it. But that might make it a little bit better of an experience for you. And for any questions, first for Brent and later for the REWS panel, as we go into as we go in later in the morning, please use the Dory. The link is right. I'm going to put it in chat here in a second, and it's also on the invite, on the calendar invite. So if you can, and failing that, you're welcome to drop. If you don't want to put it on the Dory, you can drop the questions in chat as well. And if you want to follow along, we have a schedule. It's posted. It's on the invite as well, and so you can follow that along for our agenda this morning. Lastly, please know that the summit is being recorded. For those, we have people in different time zones that they're in bed right now, so we want them to be able to catch this at a later time. So this is being recorded. Thank you for your understanding about that. And without any further ado, I just want to introduce Newton Cheng, Global Health and Performance Lead. He's going to kick us off this morning with some opening remarks. Over to you, Newton.
All right, thank you, Stuart. So first, a big good morning to all of you. Welcome to both the Health and Performance team, as well as our partners from the broader REWS organization. We are very excited to be here with you today. Before I get into my remarks, first I'd like to offer a huge thank you to Stuart and his team who pulled together this event. It was a lot of work, and it's on behalf of the entire organization, and it's for all of our benefit. So thank you to all of you. We really appreciate it. For those I haven't met, as Stuart mentioned, my name is Newton Cheng, and I proudly lead the Global Health and Performance organization. To kick off today, I'd like to discuss a few things. First, I want to reflect on the journey that's brought us here today to talk about change management and change leadership. Second, I'd like to talk a little bit about where I see us going next. And then finally, what is the challenge and the opportunity that I see in all of that? So first, let's talk about our journey. Continuous change has always been part of the journey here at Google. So when I joined Google way back in 2008, we were largely a single business centered around search. We were actually still months away from Chrome and Android being released. We were all being forced to use this new wonky product called Google Docs, and we were all pretty upset about it. And shockingly, it was actually the first time we ever had budgets. So that was like the big culture change, was you have to count the money now. So times have changed. Fast forward, and Google has grown and diversified into many multi-billion-dollar businesses, each with a different business model, a different culture, and a different set of underlying needs for their organization. Within REWS and DRS, we've gone from focusing on, when I arrived, we really talked about developing floors of buildings, then to whole buildings, then to campuses and neighborhoods. And now we're talking about innovative, never seen before ground up construction at a district scale. Thinking at this scale and with developments in society, that's pushed us in health and performance to think beyond fitness and massage and think beyond focusing mainly on physical health and much more deeply explore mental and social health, as well as the connection between the health of our Googlers and that of our families and our neighbors in the local community. So all of this has required an immense amount of agility. And in order to have that agility to operate in this environment, H+P has always invested in our people and our organization. So it's always been a focus of ours to find ways to maintain and continually increase the psychological safety within our teams and our organization. We've done things like look at agile project management and made that a part of how we do things. We've restructured our organization to balance speed and agility with stable large-scale operations. And then we're continually adding new capabilities, such as design, marketing, communications, deeper project and program management, and then most recently, change management. Now, it's not perfect, and we have a long way to go, but we have made a ton of progress. And it all came together really amazingly well at the beginning of the pandemic. So before the pandemic, we had no digital footprint. With the beginning of the pandemic, we pivoted and we scaled from no digital footprint all the way to 1,000 classes and coaching sessions per week. So in the scale of 3 months, we were able to grow a global scale line of business with very high user satisfaction. So I just want to call out the magnitude of that. This was lauded by our larger organization as an example of organizational agility, and a huge, huge kudos and thank you to all of you, because none of that could have happened without all of your hard work, collaboration, and partnership. So we've done a lot of great stuff, but where do we go from here? We're entering a phase that's going to be more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous than ever before in our history. So Google is increasingly returning to the office. We are being asked to explore things such as outdoor amenities that would allow us to start coming together again while accounting for social distancing. We see huge variation in the local conditions around the pandemic between offices, regions, and countries around the entire world. At the same time, we're about to launch into continuous pilots around new flexible workspaces and how we might set up things so that teams can start to come together again. And then lastly, this will all bridge us into what we're calling reimagine. This will be our new when we go back to the office and try to think about how do we maximize our time together for collaboration while also capturing the best of what we've learned from work from home. So we're really trying to reinvent what is the future of the workplace experience. This is a huge, huge undertaking. And in that, I think there's a pretty big challenge and a pretty big opportunity. So in terms of the challenge, as I said, change is going to be a continuous part of our reality. It always has been, and moving forward, it's going to be, but with increasing volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We have a big opportunity in all of this. We have prepared for this. We've greatly increased our organizational agility, and we've met so many of these challenges head on. Starting last week, we started to make a very intentional investment in developing our change management skills. And today, we're going to continue our learning around not just deepening our understanding of change management, but also what it means to lead through change, and finally, what it truly means to be a change agile organization. This group has been leaders in how we've had to pivot in the pandemic. We have the opportunity to continue being leaders across REWS and across Google going forward in order to help the Google community continue to thrive. So my ask of you today, and for part 2 of this summit, we're going to have some amazing speakers. Today we have Brent Gleeson, as well as several of your fellow Roosters who have really been on the front lines in many different contexts in terms of navigating change. So for you, thinking through the makeup of our organization, you can think of our people, our culture, our processes, and our structures. I ask you to really listen in and think about what can we learn today that's going to help us become better leaders through change and become a more change agile organization. If we continue this learning journey and do so in partnership with our fellow Roosters on this call and beyond, I have no doubt that we in H+P, as well as our partners, we're going to be able to continue to lead H+P and help lead global programs, REWS, and Google through whatever comes next. So with that, to both the H+P team as well as to our partners on this call, I just want to say thank you once again for everything you do. You've been so critical to helping Google's community thrive during this really challenging time. thank you for your partnership, and thank you in advance for all your time and engagement today. And let's have a great summit. Back to you, Stuart.
Thank you. Thank you, Newton. Appreciate that. Thank you. And for those who've joined since we came on, I'm Stuart Ambrose. I'm a program management director over at Exos here on the Google account. And I'm going to be your virtual MC today. So before we get to our main speaker, Brent Gleeson, I want to introduce Jonathan Puskis. He's the vice president and head of account here for Exos at Google. And Jonathan will be introducing Brent today.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Certainly, it's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Brent Gleeson, who's showing up on your screen right now as Diane Crace, is going to share his experience at leading change. This is a subject in which, as Newton mentioned, we should all be deeply interested as we collaboratively guide our teams through our evolving vision for the employee experience and the role of workforce services. Brent is a Navy SEAL combat veteran with multiple tours in Iraq and Africa. Upon leaving the Navy in 2005, Brent directed his discipline and battlefield lessons to the world of business and has become an accomplished entrepreneur, best-selling author, and acclaimed speaker on topics ranging from leadership and building high-performance teams to culture and organizational transformation. He is the best-selling author of Taking Point, a Navy SEAL's 10 fail-safe principles for leading through change, which was a #1 new release in the categories of organizational change and business structural adjustment. Brent is also the founder and CEO of Taking Point Leadership, which is a progressive leadership and management consulting firm with a focus on leadership development, business transformation, and building high-performance cultures. Brent has studied at Oxford University, and he's earned degrees from Southern Methodist University and the University of San Diego, which allows him to adeptly combine both academic and real-world applications. Brent's earned awards for business leadership and was named one of the top 10 CEOs by Entrepreneur Magazine for his exemplary approach to building high-performance teams. Brent's new book, titled Embrace the Suck, will be released in December 2020 and includes a foreword by friend and teammate David Goggins. It is about personal transformation, learning the craft of comfort zone expansion in order to overcome adversity and live a fulfilling, purpose-driven life. For the next hour, Brent's going to share some introductory thoughts, participate in a discussion format conversation facilitated by Stuart, and then concluding with responses to your questions. Please join me in welcoming Brent.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay? Please. All right. Take your seats. Take your seats.
Yep, we got you.
Again, I'm Brent Gleeson. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor and pleasure to be here with you today. First and foremost, I, of course, want to hope that this meeting finds you all safe and well. As you all know, these have been quite challenging times we've been living in over the past 6 months. Times that have really impacted our work, our teams, our organizations, families, relationships, hobbies, even for some of us, our hopes and dreams. So I want to talk today about how teams and even individuals can successfully lead through adversity and change, as Newton was stating earlier, while controlling what we can and still design desired outcomes. So when a SEAL platoon or special missions unit is on patrol in enemy territory or sneaking into an enemy compound, the person out front is the point man. They're taking point. They are leading their teams, as Newton said earlier, into what we call VUCA environments. And yes, that's one of the hundreds, if not possibly thousands of acronyms we live by in the United States military. It refers to the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments that we operate in. And as you know, operating in and leading through constantly changing, dynamic, volatile environments really requires us, especially as leaders of people, to think more creatively about the landscape of the battlefield before us, to innovate, to adapt, to transform mindset and our behavioral expectations in order to really own our battle space with intention, to collaborate more effectively, communicate more efficiently, so that we can own that battle space with intention and continue to achieve winning results. And that's what I'd really like to talk about today, and Stuart's going to be the MC for some Q&A we're going through, is how each and every one of us can really authentically embody the very same leadership and culture principles that forge some of the most elite special operations units in the world in order to successfully navigate change, adversity, disruption, and continue to drive desired business outcomes in any landscape, any battlefield, in any environment. And as we all know, the fast-paced world of modern business is complex enough. And now amidst, of course, new challenges of a global pandemic, civil, social, and political unrest, economic uncertainty, we've all been faced with new personal and professional challenges, many challenges that none of us have really dealt with before. And in reflecting back on all the things we've been through over the past 6 months, it keeps bringing me back to one of my absolute favorite quotes, a quote about resilience by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that says, "If you can't fly, you run. If you can't run, you walk. If you can't walk, you crawl. But no matter what, you keep moving forward." In the SEAL teams, we have an ethos, essentially a creed that embodies our culture and our core values, our guiding principles. And a similar line from that ethos states, "I will not quit. I persevere and thrive on adversity. And if knocked down, I will get back up every time. I am never out of the fight." And it's that same mindset, those same behavioral expectations that each and every one of you, all of us, can authentically embody to continue to keep taking point in your role and your team, in this organization, and to be, as we say in the SEAL teams, in our work, in our lives, with our families, all in, all the time. And with that, I would like to kick it back to our esteemed MC, Lieutenant Commander Stuart Ambrose. Stuart?
Hi, thank you, Brent. Thank you. And for those of you who caught the rank in there, yes, I am in the military as well. Very different life experience in the military, first in the Marines, now in the Coast Guard. And I think something that's important to let everybody know is that the SEALs hold a special place in the U.S. military, and that's one of the reasons we have Brent here today. They go through training and an experience that few, even in the military, can truly understand and even appreciate. So, Brent, I know you have got this incredible and interesting background, but I want to understand a little bit more about what inspired you at all to join the Navy. You know, why the Navy, and then how, after you got out of the Navy, you transitioned back into the world of business and entrepreneurship.
Sure. Just for the participants, a little backstory. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, did my undergrad education at Southern Methodist University, and earned degrees in finance and economics. So naturally, upon graduation, I took a job as a financial analyst with a global firm based in downtown Dallas. Now, at that time, I did have a very close college friend of mine who was a year behind me. Now, he was, in fact, one of these young men who had one of these lifelong visions and dreams of one day graduating from SMU and at least attempting to be accepted into the notorious SEAL training pipeline. And while I thought that was, of course, highly admirable, I also deemed it to be a somewhat unrealistic career path for a young man, knowing the extreme attrition rates and rigors of the job. So I wished him well. But while I was working out in corporate America and he was a senior at SMU, we started training together. So for me, it was just a way to stay fit and help a friend prepare for an arduous journey. And so we were spending a lot of time, weeknights and weekends, running, swimming, and counseling, really helping him prepare for the PST entrance exam just to be accepted into the program. And during that time, we were having a lot of dialogue about the implications of that journey and the history of the Naval Special Warfare community and the culture and our forefathers from the underwater demolition teams in World War II to when we really cut our teeth as an elite assault force in Vietnam. And so I started reading some books and really became enthralled and fascinated by the leadership mindset, the culture, and how we leverage culture and behavioral expectations to achieve desired outcomes in the Naval Special Warfare community, and how we prepare both mind and body in order to really achieve extremely high levels of engagement and that emotional connection to the mission and what we're trying to do, which, of course, as you guys know, is essential for any high-performing team in any environment. So that growing fascination, coupled with the, let's face it, rather boring nature of my entry-level analyst position, led to the culmination of me writing my parents a letter, telling them I was quitting my job and trying out for the SEAL program. So you can imagine how that went over with close friends and family, knowing that it's about a 90% failure rate. So, but nonetheless, by the grace of God, we joined, made it through. I was assigned to BUDS class 235. And then we can talk a little bit about the training briefly later, but I went in right before 9/11. So the training pipeline's about a little over a year long. So mostly what you see on TV is BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition Seal. It shows where Hell Week and all that horrible stuff you see. Then you go to advanced training, which is SEAL qualification training. During that week we had off between BUDS and SQT was 9/11. And that's what started, and I wrote about this in my first book, really the constant state of organizational change and culture shift, not just in the special operations community, but in the military in its entirety, in this post 9/11 world of constant change that we've been in. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but then I had not planned on doing it as a career, so I did 3 combat deployments. And looking back, quite frankly, you experience some levels of guilt for leaving, and your brothers and sisters are still on the battlefield, but I kind of had a plan I wanted to stick to, and quite frankly, back then none of us had any idea how long these conflicts could possibly go on, and yet here we are. So 3 combat deployments might sound like a lot, but I've had friends who've done 14 or 15 combat deployments. So I transitioned out, went to graduate school, and launched into the super easy, non-stressful world of building companies.
That's awesome. I want to understand, I think a lot of people would be really interested to know more about the training. And obviously it's legendary, right? We've seen the documentaries, we've seen the news clips. We like you just said, the pass rate is incredibly small. But I think specifically, how did that training prepare you for not only what you faced then as a SEAL, but even beyond, and what you faced as an entrepreneur and in business? Sure. And was it mental? Was it physical? What was the toughest part of that training for you?
Sure. One thing I knew going into it, I knew that I didn't really know much at all. Now there's a lot more resources online. There's very specific training programs on the official SEALSWCC websites, formal mentorship programs. I mentor guys informally into and through the program. And I always get the same questions. Is it more mental? Is it more physical? What's that intimate blend of mental and physical well-being that you have to have in order to successfully navigate the course? And the fascinating thing, it's a wonderful social experiment of mind and body, because it's such a level playing field. You've got people filtering in from all different diverse backgrounds, Olympic athletes, college athletes, no athletes, highly educated people, and people with no education, different cultural backgrounds. And so it's fascinating when you see a group of people. Let's say, for simple math, your class starts with 200. We started with about 200. We graduated 23. But of that 200, you would never be able to handpick those that will be standing at graduation. You'd be wrong about 90% of the time by making judgments based on physical appearance or their general social demeanor. But one thing I knew going in, and I tell the people that I mentor this too, is focus on what is in your immediate control. I touched on that earlier in my opening comments. Same thing within an organization, navigating change, really focusing on what is in our immediate control and sphere of influence, and not ignoring, but deprioritizing the things we have no control over, because we waste a lot of time, emotion, and energy just in life in general on things totally outside of our control. In the SEAL teams, we call this staying in your 3-foot world. I'll get to that later. So the one thing I knew I had total control over was physical preparation. And through physical preparation, you can build mental fortitude, grit, and resilience as well. So after I quit my job in Dallas, my buddy and I, with whom I'd been training, actually moved to Crested Butte, Colorado. I don't know if you guys know where that is, but a small mountain town, about 10, 11,000 feet, to train at high altitude for another 5 months to prepare our bodies as much as we possibly could, so that fitness would be the last thing on my mind. There's going to be all these other stresses, rigors, and things once you get tested by the crucible of the early stages of BUDS and Hell Week, which I'll talk about in a second. So you want to control what you can, just like in any environment where we're trying to achieve any type of goal in life or business or personal, professional paths. Focusing on what's in our control helps us have a greater impact. Therefore, we feel more fulfilled and more engaged in what we're trying to accomplish. So just so people who are listening know, the BUDS has 3 phases. The first phase is 2 months long, and Hell Week is the 4th or 5th week of first phase. So you pretty much weed out everybody in your entire class in the first month of training. So you'll lose most of your class, a good over half your class leading up to Hell Week in those 2 or 3 weeks. And then Hell Week is the brutal crucible that all SEALs share that few students successfully navigate. So basically, to sum it up, you don't sleep for an entire week. You run the equivalent of multiple marathons while wet and sandy, inside and out. The instructors make sure you get the sand on the inside of your clothing so that it strips the flesh off your body as you run. You swim dozens of miles in the open ocean, run with heavy logs, boats, backpacks. You run the obstacle course multiple times a day. And all students enter Hell Week either sick, injured, or both. So you're not really starting off well as you go into it. And then you'll lose most of your class either due to quitting or severe injury during that week. And then the hard part is the training gets more difficult after that.
And so I guess the question I'm always curious about, do you find that it prepared you, and did it prepare you for more than just being a SEAL? Like, do you look back now, whatever this is, almost 20 years, I guess, later, and say, and still, wow, you're taking those learnings with you, or was it something that was just applicable to, those years when you were working as a SEAL?
I think the biggest takeaway from the training piece, and then of course applying that, on the literal battlefield soon thereafter, is, if I had to think about one thing, it really goes into what I talk about in the next book, is about mental fortitude and resilience, and really understanding that it's not something you don't have, a resilience bank account, so to speak, and learning how to make more deposits than withdrawals, as I refer to it, understanding, how resilient you truly can be, kind of by eating the elephant one bite at a time. And like when you're tested in SEAL training, obviously there's many external and internal factors that you can't control, that you're put in highly stressful and painful situations that you never would have ever been put in your entire life. And that's what tests people, and they realize that either they're willing to push forward or they're not. And we've invested millions of dollars in trying to identify the cognitive, emotional, physical, and mental attributes of students who are more likely to successfully navigate the course. And it really comes down to really three things that are important motivation theory in any team or organization. It's really autonomy, purpose, and mastery. So underneath purpose, most specifically, is we found that students who are truly deeply emotionally connected to the notion of service, not just service in the military, but service in naval special warfare as an operator, they are the ones who are more likely to successfully navigate that course, because that emotional connection, just like on any team or trying to achieve any lofty goal, drives you through the hard parts, through the adversity, through the pain, the strain. It allows you to kind of lean into it, even accept it, maybe even embrace it a little bit. And then you continue to build that mental fortitude. And that's helped me, in the world of entrepreneurship, which has about the same failure rate as SEAL training. It's helped me with, in marriage, in raising children, and then of course, in navigating change in organizations. Newton teed this up wonderfully at the beginning, and understanding, especially an organization that's already designed as a change culture, and learning how to continue to, adapt on that changing battlefield. Those are the main things that I really took away from it.
Great, thank you. And I want to keep going on this theme of change. Obviously, it's the theme of what we're here to talk about today, because you then move out of your training phase, and you eventually, within short order, end up in Iraq. And you're, if memory serves, from your book, I recommend it to everybody. It's fantastic. Your task unit was, I believe, one of, if not the first, to see combat in Iraq. And one of the things is, you may have whatever planning, whatever training you've done, it doesn't necessarily, it's always going to switch the minute that you encounter that kind of environment. And so what were your biggest takeaways regarding leadership, change, culture, as they related to, let's face it, a very high performing team, not only in that environment, but really in any environment, so what were the key takeaways and the attributes that you found for those teams that were successful?
Well, you're correct. So we were actually, Afghanistan had already kicked off. My task unit at SEAL Team 5, based here in San Diego, we were going through our workup, and then Iraq kicked off, and our task unit of about 35 SEALs were actually the very first SEALs operating in and around Baghdad, Ramadi, and Fallujah I think we arrived in April '03. Oh, God, I feel old just saying that out loud. And so one of the biggest takeaways is, one of my favorite quotes, you guys know this, is, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Or as Mike Tyson more eloquently put it, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So one of the biggest takeaways, that I know you've had and Jonathan and Larry from just military experience in general, and anybody else who's served in the military or other types of high-performing organizations, that preparation far exceeds the notion of planning. So, for example, at Taking Point Leadership, we teach our organizational partners, how to do an 80% plan. There really is no such thing as a 100% plan, because by the time you achieve that 100% plan, the landscape will have changed completely. All your contingencies are shot. Your who, what, whens are probably broken, and your general objective is probably going to need to be different. So, learning to adapt. I mean, our I won't get into the details, but our first few combat missions were highly complex with multiple moving parts, highly matrix teams with a million things going on at once. Our first mission, we weren't even in Iraq yet. We were still staged at Ali Salim Air Base in Kuwait, and we were tasked with assaulting and securing a very, very large hydroelectric power plant and dam that was to be destroyed by insurgents and retreating forces. And so we had a whole task unit of SEALs, a mobility SEAL task unit, a whole platoon of Polish special operators called the GROM, or their Tier 1 special operations asset, multiple large Chinook helicopters, a 4-hour insert, and all these things. And as soon as as soon as boots are on the ground, the plan changes. So really, it goes back to preparation. We rehearsed for that mission for 2 weeks. What we call is, dirt diving or rehearsing, literally choreographing every single move, knowing every landing zone, every secondary landing zone, tertiary landing zone, who's doing what, when, and where, who's on comms, what are all the contingencies that we could possibly think of. And a lot of the contingencies we thought of happened. Sandstorm got us rolled twice for 48 hours. Sandstorm in flight. Polish guy broke his back on the fast stroke. I almost broke my back and cut my face open with my own rifle, fast stroking the quickie saw on the target. So it's all these things that continue to change. The other thing is just the fascinating level when you can achieve, and I know we'll talk about this in a little bit, achieve a true culture of accountability, like we call it extreme ownership within a team, where there's leadership at every single level, and everybody is 100% accountable by really focusing on not just their own roles and responsibilities, but looking out for the person to their left and right over their own sort of selfish desires. Those things about the dynamics of a truly high-performing team. Our culture is not perfect. When we're working, it's pretty perfect. When we're not working, it's, we have all the same social nuances of any type of team where you put a bunch of A-type personalities into one pot. It can be a little explosive and volatile. But fascinating thing is, when it was time to work, it was time to work. And that's it. The main objective, the mission, everybody emotionally connected to it. And you can see that, you can build that into teams in the civilians of this world by continually talking about it and rewarding those types of behaviors and really designing a culture. And I like to get into how we do this a little bit later, that drives people to proactively take the necessary actions to achieve the desired outcome.
That's awesome. As a reminder to everybody too, we're going to be having this discussion here for a little while, and then eventually we're going to switch to some Q&A with the audience. So feel free to drop some questions in chat. The link for the Dory is also in chat, so drop questions on there, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But before we do that, I want to, so you obviously served in Iraq, did several tours there, and then you transitioned out. Now we're really talking about like personal kind of change, right? That happens, and you come back out of the Navy. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur and in business, or was this something that kind of just happened? Again, was it planned, or was that change just something you were agile enough to accept and take advantage of?
I have all types of foolish ideas, Stuart. So this was another one of them. I had, just similar to the SEAL journey, I had no initial aspirations of entering the world of entrepreneurship. My transition plan was to have zero downtime and start my grad school MBA program like 4 days after I got out of the Navy. And so the initial intention was to get back into the world of finance, possibly real estate development. The economy was booming at the time, and obviously that bubble was never going to end. So figured I would just hitch my wagon to that shining star and ride it all the way to Glory Town. So the first company we started was, very cliche story. I met a couple guys in grad school, and one of our major finance projects ended up being the business plan for the first company. It was, of course, overly complex, all these ridiculous things. We boiled it down to something simple. And essentially our first company was a home finding search engine, essentially an early version of Trulia or Zillow. And then 2008, 2009 happened. So that was our first experience on a new battlefield of VUCA environments, of getting hammered by the implosion of the global housing market, predominantly here in North America, of course. But we actually pivoted pretty quickly. We learned so much about digital marketing, media, analytics, just by running that business, and we'd raised a couple $1 million for that company. So we were all in. I mean, it was tripling in size every year for a few years, and then obviously we started to see, that bell curve and this associated plateau of that company's growth, which obviously is going to happen with any high growth company, even though we were small. So we went out and raised more money and started a digital media and analytics companies to diversify ourselves, obviously outside of the cyclical nature of the housing market. And we were blessed, and that company doubled or tripled in size every year, both in headcount and revenue for many, many years. It's on the Inc. 500 list for several years. So really it goes back to, again, this is not without like a lot of suffering, a lot of tears, mostly by me, a lot of stress and anxiety, and making a lot of costly mistakes. You realize, obviously, in the world of business and entrepreneurship, almost every mistake has an associated hard and soft cost. In fact, every single one does. But really it goes back to learning. And yeah, go ahead.
Can you go into that a little bit more, like the mistakes? Like, we've spent a lot of time on our teams talking about, like kind of the freedom to fail and how you navigate that failure and kind of, keep iterating and keep, improving. So I would love to hear some of your thoughts on that as you kind of experience them, in your businesses.
Well, one of my biggest challenges first was adjusting. Yeah, sure, there's many leadership and cultural principles you can take from the world of special operations and the military, but they don't translate exactly, obviously, into the civilian world. Both of those companies had very diverse workforces, multi-generational workforces, a lot of young people, millennials and whatnot. And this is going to shock everybody, but you can't manage a group of millennials like you do a SEAL platoon. I didn't know that at the time. So really, it was really learning. I believe the best leaders out there are lifelong learners, constantly craving not just learning, but also transparent feedback from the team. So one of the first things I did, when I finally pulled my head out and realized that just because your company's growing and you're profitable and shareholders are happy doesn't mean there's not threats on the horizon, of course. And so one of the things that we needed to do really was kind of take a sampling of, our levels of engagement within the organization. How engaged are people really? What are their perceptions of me as their leader? So we rolled out, engagement surveys, 360 surveys, which was a horrible experience at first. Never do those, just kidding. And really to kind of tap into understanding what is the real pulse in the organization. What do people really think? Do people really clearly understand our mission, our vision, our purpose as to where we're going and why? And then, of course, getting feedback personally, not just about the organization, but personally for me as a manager and leader of people, what are my shortcomings? I don't care about what they say about how the things that I'm doing well. One of the things I love about the military is we have and Newton, you mentioned this earlier, is a very high level of psychological safety when it comes to transparency and peer-to-peer feedback. Because we don't have time for the nonsense and time for passive-aggressive communication. When we're in an after-action review or a debrief or just a general learning environment, we need to learn from each other very quickly, and we need to course correct very quickly. And in an organization that has heightened levels of psychological safety and high levels of engagement, which, as we know, is not typical in most organizations, the data typically comes back the same. It's usually about a third of the organization's engaged. The rest are actively or passively disengaged. And so that shows us that it's a constant journey of increasing engagement and aligning culture with strategy, really defining the behavioral expectations that you want in an organization. And that's one of the biggest things that I really had to learn, is how to design an environment that's going to achieve the financial results and business outcomes that we want to as an organization. Oftentimes we see organizations kind of do those two things in silos, well-intentioned, but you're like, well, we got to have this great culture, and well, we got to make millions of dollars next year and hit this certain level of EBITDA, but they don't connect those two and understand how the people practices bridge that gap and can make a company. We call it this isn't our term, but the service profit chain. What really drives profitability and growth really comes down to leadership and engagement. And engagement doesn't happen without solid leaders at every level in the organization. And understanding the two disciplines of leadership and management, which are essentially different things.
And as we delve a little bit further into kind of leading through change, obviously, I think we can all agree that this year, 2020, is the definition of a VUCA environment. And it's probably worth when, if you could just give, let's go through the acronym again for VUCA so everyone's on the same page. But, change and uncertainty is now, it's more prevalent than most of us have ever experienced before, at least in our lifetimes. So you wrote Taking Point, bestseller. It was, what inspired that book? And can you share, I wanted to understand some of the fundamental principles that you kind of write about in the book, so that we can understand this leading through change, and what are the things that kind of take you there.
Well, the main thing that inspired the book is I'm a SEAL, so we are required to write books, as you know, Stuart. So in Bud, they actually now teach writing, acting, and how to properly put hair gel in. So that's a whole other thing. We've been doing a lot of transformations in our training program. But in all seriousness, what inspired it was my key learnings and the experiences that I had in growing those previous two companies. So when I sold the agency, the next step of the plan was to write the book. And a lot of people have been saying, well, when are you going to write a book? Because I'd been writing my Forbes leadership column for many years prior to that, and with good feedback. So decided to put much of, quite frankly, it kind of was a nice springboard. Much of the research I'd done and the articles that I'd written created a nice foundation for the book proposal. And then Simon & Schuster bought the book, and writing a book about, I wanted to write a little bit more progressive book about change management, change leadership within a modern organization that's a little bit more current. One of the big inspirations was General Stanley McChrystal's Team of Teams. So he was kind enough to do the front cover blurb for my book, which has similar philosophies on a more modern, agile organization and how to better prepare an organization for lasting change, and engaging everybody in that process and shifting mindsets towards the new way of doing things. But as we all know now, it's the level of just take digital transformation alone that would take most organizations a couple of years have forced a lot of us to change in a few months, which is actually pretty fascinating and astonishing. But really, my experience is what inspired the book. And then also there was a strategic imperative behind it. I wanted to build a company around those principles.
Sure. And one of the things that you go into, and you talked a little bit about it before, but I wonder if you can expand on it, is the concept of accountability, right? And so that culture of accountability that you talk about is how can a team in any environment, such as the one in which we serve here at Google, create that culture of accountability? What does that look like? We're obviously not, we're very different culture, as we should be from a military one, and especially from what the SEALs are. So how do you kind of, aren't we talking apples and oranges here, or can we learn something and create some of that bit of the culture and take that and learn from that on our end? Any examples that you would point to?
Yeah, three things. One is, I'll just briefly talk about a model. It's more complex, obviously, in its implementation in an organization, but in its simplicity, we call it a culture transformation results pyramid. Really designed with the desired outcome of achieving heightened levels of accountability. No team out there says, well, we don't need accountability. I don't want to hold myself accountable. The team doesn't need to hold themselves accountable. It's a notion that pretty much any organization or team thinks about. They may not talk about it as much, but how do you actually do it? How do you shift everything towards heightened levels of accountability to achieve the desired outcomes of the organization? So in its simple form, there's 4 tiers in that pyramid. At the top, there's the results, so the outcome. And every team or organization has 2 types of results: the existing results and the desired results. The results necessary to achieve an objective, fulfill the mission, the vision of the organization, a transformation initiative, whatever that result is. It could be macro, micro, what have you. And the next tier is the actions. So essentially the execution of your mission plan, the who, the what, the when, all the things that are going to happen to achieve that desired outcome. And next, this is where it gets a little softer here as we talk about the values and the beliefs and behaviors that everyone essentially in a perfect world would authentically embody completely, that drives that emotional connection. So they proactively take those actions to achieve the results. And then of course at the bottom are the rituals. So what are the cultural experiences? You might say, well, what's a cultural experience or ritual? Well, I would argue that this is a cultural experience designed to have a desired outcome. Would you all agree? Yes, I think you would. So when we talk about the rituals, what is that? Sometimes they're haphazard, sometimes they already exist within an organization, and sometimes we need to design them and implement them to support the beliefs. And in a change scenario, when we're thinking about new actions and new desired outcomes, oftentimes the beliefs have to shift a little bit towards the new battlefield, the new way of doing things, shifting from, and it could be as simple as the implementation of a new software program or massive internal restructuring in an organization. So large or small, and oftentimes there have to be new rituals to help support those beliefs. So one interesting story going back to SEAL training is one of our rituals that supports the belief and the notion that accountability is paramount in our high-performing team is it's essentially an accountability drill. It happens every week through BUDS, more sparsely through advanced training, but it's a wonderful evolution called the top 5, bottom 5. As I said before, we weigh heavily peer evaluation. So if you've ever done a 360, I'm sure many of you have, think about a 360 review on steroids, where the stakes are extremely high, where if you don't score well, you just lose your job. So every Friday afternoon before I'm being secured for the weekend, the instructors will, depending on where you are, they'll bring you to the classroom, they pass out your top 5, bottom 5 form. There's 5 lines on the top, 5 lines on the bottom, areas for extra commentary. And essentially, you're instructed to anonymously rank who you believe the top 5 performers are in the class and who you believe the bottom 5 performers are in the class. And I know some of you positive folks out there are thinking, wow, what a great way to publicly reward excellence in the class and put these great performers on a pedestal. Well, unfortunately, you would be wrong in that thinking. They never tell you who make the top 5, because that would, of course, be, what is that called? Positive reinforcement. And we do not deal in positive reinforcement in SEAL training. No, on the contrary, we deal heavily in negative reinforcement. So what they do is they take all the names that were listed in the bottom 5 from every form and post them on the whiteboard next to the door to the classroom. But it gets better. Then they put checks next to each name, notating how many times your name was listed in the bottom 5 as per your peers' reviews. Oh, it gets better. The one name with the most checks associated with it every single Friday is immediately ejected from training. No ifs, ands, or buts, no appealing to the empathies of the human resources team, because we do not have a human resources team in SEAL training. But in all seriousness, it's a ritual that instills the belief that we must hold ourselves and our peers to the highest standard, the highest level of extreme accountability. And that drives the actions necessary to achieve our desired result on the battlefield. And so it's these rituals that we design. And we don't have time today, but we have endless case studies actually from our own clients that shows the measurable financial return on shifting towards higher levels of accountability, scalability, growth, profitability, increased stock value, shareholder value. So and you guys know this. I mean, you guys, I don't need to preach to you about the importance of culture, but a lot of organizations either don't get it or don't know how to do it.
Got it. Thank you. But I just really quickly on that, we don't need to go down too far down the rabbit hole, but like, obviously that negative reinforcement is not going to work at most companies, right? So like that, obviously, I think most people on the call would agree that's probably not what the culture that we want to create. So what have you seen that works successfully for the businesses of creating that accountability in a, I guess a more positive or more constructive way?
Yeah. It kind of goes back to that model of the results pyramid, just in general, where you really focus heavily on, at least I do. I'm very big, obviously, on culture and using culture to help lead through change and also design and execute desired outcomes. Because that's where most organizations in any type of transformational journey fall short, is they start on step 6 of 10 and forget all the very important foundational elements of the people practices and their levels of engagement, which is critical for any change initiative, and how they can use the positive elements of that culture to drive change, and how they can work towards mitigating or eliminating negative elements of that culture. So it really comes down to leveraging those practices and understanding how to design an environment where people will excel and thrive. And so it's not just about talking about accountability and having people have that notion that accountability is just about the repercussions that come if I fall short of this objective or miss my sales target, or whatever those goals that their manager has set for them. But in the highest performing organizations, accountability increases morale, it increases performance, and it also organically weeds out those that do not belong, which is just, the reality of any team organization. Oftentimes there are folks that would thrive in a different environment. And oftentimes, with that heightened level of accountability, and again, if it's a cultural thing, it's got to be talked about. It's got to be part of your talent acquisition strategy, rewards and recognition, development programs. It has to live and breathe in almost everything you do, but it creates a workplace and a team where, it creates this level of personal accountability. It's almost like, I call it positive peer pressure, where just like in SEAL training or any type of team where you don't want to let your brothers and sisters down. It's, one of our prayers that we, say sometimes before mission would be, Lord, let me not be unworthy of my brothers. Meaning I'm going to hold myself so accountable that nobody's got to worry about anything outside of my roles and responsibilities because I got it. And if everybody thinks that way and behaves that way, then there's really no limit to what a team can achieve.
Thank you. And then, we're going to shift here in just a couple minutes to some audience Q&A. But before we do, I have a couple final questions for you. And your last answer actually kind of leads right into this. And it's about trust. You talk a lot about this in your book and maintaining that's a culture pillar for you and leading through change. As we all know, trust in any relationship is delicate, and it's critical for maintaining an improvement in engagement on a team. Would love to know some of your thoughts on trust. And just for those of you on the call today, so I think a lot of people think like, that the military understands trust, but even within the military, how the SEALs are viewed in regards to trust is very exceptional. They really stand out amongst that group for embodying that value and living it. So I'm really curious about how that plays for teams for you.
Well, you essentially kind of tied it all together there. I mean, it really goes back to what I consider to be the two most important culture pillars of high performance are accountability, and the other one is trust. Both are very measurable behavioral norms in an organization. And with the right accountability mechanisms, you can tie these behavioral expectations back to growth and profitability, and also wasted time and resources. Most organizations that show low levels of engagement, it's oftentimes driven by extreme low levels of accountability and trust, sometimes at the top of the organization or within middle management that really essentially owns the level of engagement of a good majority of any team or organization. I saw some data, I think it was from last year, maybe a couple years ago, but it trends in the same direction as, because of the, levels of engagement we typically see in most well-run organizations, which is relatively low or lower than we would want. And most of that engagement is driven by low levels of psychological safety, an unclear vision, not knowing how I fit into mission success. I don't trust my managers or the leadership within the organization. Maybe I don't trust my peers. That obviously decreases engagement, morale, and performance. And so the outcome is low. But it also, it showed that this research showed that, that level of engagement in organizations can cost us upwards of $500 to $600 billion a year here in the United States in lost productivity. So again, going back to the importance of measuring these people practices and understanding the importance of trust, psychological safety, transparency. I know those words get kind of thrown around a lot, so it's got to. We always encourage our clients and even ourselves to really define what that means within your own team when you're thinking about how to align behaviors with the accountability mechanisms. But understanding how to measure, and there's simple ways, obviously through surveys, engagement surveys, and other types of feedback mechanisms. But then, of course, the most important thing is if you are going to engage in understanding how much trust we have in a team, and you're gathering feedback, you're giving everybody a voice, then you damn well do some of that data. A lot of times we do that, and then we put that data on the digital shelf, and nothing happens, and then what happens? Trust actually goes down even more. So it really is about leaning into and taking actions towards enhancing trust to see an enhanced result and outcome for the organization.
One quick question, this is a little bit more practical, but how have you wrote an article, I believe a week or two ago in your Forbes leadership column about best practices for leading remote teams. Can you share some of the tips? Obviously, most of the people on the call today manage humans, so we're managing them remotely. Any tips and best practices to share?
Sure. In the article I shared 13, a lot of them you guys are kind of self-evident. So I wanted to focus on 3 or 4 of them. One is the importance of actually, and I'll explain what I mean by this, is an increased level of communication. I don't mean more meetings. And by the way, guys, not every meeting has to be a video conference. You know, I don't know where we've shifted to where every single call has to be a video conference. I gotta, you know, take my tank top off and comb my hair, and it's just, you know, it gets a little time consuming. But that being said, I believe heavily in, as a manager, for daily check-ins. It doesn't have to be your formal, you know, weekly team meeting or, you know, bi-weekly team meetings, however level of frequency you do, but a quick daily check-in, whether it's a simple conversation or a check-in on a project, something where you are interacting virtually, socially, over the phone or through video chat with each of your team members. It doesn't have to be too long, but because, you know, people's level of engagement is what it is in a regular workplace setting, working remote for many people can cause a heightened level of disengagement, isolation. It's more difficult to gather information oftentimes, and oftentimes it can also actually thicken the walls of those silos that innately you know, do live in most organizations already, both vertically and horizontally. The other thing, kind of, you know, skipping ahead, is going back to empowerment. You know, so a lot of the same practices we have to do, but you know, we realize now how important these are critically in this virtual environment. Is, you know, focusing on managing outcomes, not activities. That's one thing. Obviously, just the, you know, the basic formula for don't micromanage your people. We're not supposed to do it anyways, so don't do it in a virtual setting. You know, really focus on what are those outcomes, really defining the purpose of those outcomes, because a lot of teams right now are doing, the individuals in those teams oftentimes, maybe not at Google, but I know on our team and many of our clients' teams are doing, you know, as much work, if not more work, but they're doing different activities associated with probably different goals or, you know, a new strategic imperative within the organization that requires the team's effort and work, but essentially also possibly doing new things. And doing new things for any high performer, when you put them in a new setting, can oftentimes decrease ability and motivation, therefore decreases performance. So we have to prepare them. Obviously, nobody saw this coming, so preparing for a massive pivot in any organization usually doesn't come with months of planning. That's why we call it pivoting, a word that's far overused, and I've already said it 25 times, so I won't say it again this entire time. But then really focusing on, as a manager, again, more of your mentorship capability over your management capability. That's where true leadership comes in. Being flexible with your team members, knowing their work from home challenges. Some people have spouses and kids. Some people don't. Some people are working at Starbucks. Some people are in their home office that's got doors and they're squared away. Some people are working in the closet or the bathroom or taking calls from the backyard next to mowing the lawn. And then some people are experiencing, you know, relationship challenges. You know, I think that, you know, I don't know what the divorce rate is going to be in 2020, but you know, there's a lot of marriages and a lot of divorces. And I actually heard data yesterday, not to go off on a tangent on this, but it's kind of interesting, is the divorce rate for 5 months and under has dramatically increased. It's the highest amongst the divorce rates out there. But again, that goes back into, and I see Newton nodding his head, it goes back into, you know, mental and physical wellness and really encouraging that amongst your team members. I know that's what you guys do every day. And so creating that continued balance and encouraging that too.
And on that, you know, final question for me before we switch to some audience questions. Resilience, you know, mental fortitude. Newton spoke about it. You've spoken about it. I think, you know, that's going to be kind of the subject of your book that's coming out in December. So wanted to see if you wanted to offer any thoughts on that, a little bit of a sneak peek and what's coming from your new book.
Sure. It was a fun project. You know, I really enjoy studying transformation, whether it's in a team setting, an organization, or in individuals. I had never, I don't think I'd ever read anything in the sort of self-help genre. So I figured if I was going to embark on this journey, I should probably see what else is out there. So I read Mark Manson's first book, you know, The Subtle Art of Not Giving. I don't know, some of you have probably read that. And I was kind of intrigued by his counterintuitive approach to personal development, self-growth. It was different than a lot of the fluff that's out there on, you know, constant positive thinking. This book takes a different approach of leaning into pain, leaning into suffering, leaning into adversity, and finding new ways to channel those energies into what I call positive aggression, and finding ways to eliminate temptation, eliminate the things in your life, and sometimes the people in your life that are a negative influence or things that you don't have control over, and they're standing in the ways of living a more fulfilling, meaningful, and happier life, and having better relationships, and pursuing and achieving more of the goals we have set, assuming those goals are driven by a solid set of values. And I talk about the importance of values and really defining those and using those to limit your choices. We have too many choices out there right now. So limiting those choices help us stay laser focused, whether it's a fitness goal, professional goal, a goal with, you know, our relationship, a marriage, a spouse, you know, how we raise our kids, how we conduct school from home. All these things tie together, and we all have new goals and challenges now. So selfishly, the timing of the book is perfect because it's about resilience and mental fortitude. Comes right after the election, so a good half of the country will be really pissed off, and everyone will have had a tough year. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to pivot now.
Most of you probably know who David Goggins is. We went through Buds together, and he's a retired SEAL, lead athlete. If you can stomach, some colorful language in the forward, I allowed him creative license to write it how he wanted, then you'll be okay. Or just skip it.
Awesome. Sounds good. We're going to pivot now to some audience Q&A. I'm going to ask my good friend and one of the leaders from H+P, Larry Green. If you're on the line, Larry, why don't you come in and lead us through some questions here for the next 15 or 20 minutes.
Thanks a lot, Stuart. And Brent, it's great to listen to you. For those who don't know, I'm former Navy as well, and so it's always good to listen and talk to another sailor. Some of my classmates from the Naval Academy were former Navy SEALs, and so just listening to you, I definitely remember some of those, very similar stories and very similar events that they went through as well. And so with that, we're going to expand the conversation now to involve all of us on screen here. What I got here, I just dropped into the chat, is the Dory link. We have a couple of questions on there now, but if you do have additional questions that you have for Brent, go ahead and just drop them in. I did want to kick it off though, Brent. I've been taking a couple notes here as just listening to you, and I wanted to kind of get us all warmed up with one question here. And I got a couple of questions, but this first one is around the process of reinvention. And so when I think about that, just the effort to go through reinvention, I liked what you said about the results pyramid, results, actions, the values and rituals. But I just want to hear your thoughts around when it comes to just reinvention. I know it can be a messy experience. There's some highs and lows through it. It's a journey. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and then we'll switch to the Dory.
Sure. How personal do you guys want to get? We'll see where this goes. It's actually a really cool topic because I adjusted the results pyramid with a couple additional layers for the new book about personal reinvention. So again, having, if you think about the existing results and desired results I mentioned for an organization, it's the same thing when it comes to reinvention. What is my new desired outcome? Who do I want to be? The last chapter of the book is living with the end in mind. That's one of Stephen Covey's, 7 tenets is living with the end in mind. Managing that list of regrets that you have personally, professionally, faith, love, life, whatever those categories are, and working backwards from there to design, the life and the career that you want. And that way you can actively limit the list of regrets you have and use that, backwards momentum to design a plan for reinvention. So for whether it's reinventing yourself, reinventing your marriage, reinventing the way you parent, who you are as a person, or, shifting careers. Oftentimes, a lot of people right now are trying new things, and a lot of it's great. People are like, well, now I have the opportunity to explore, hell, I might as well explore entrepreneurship. Everything else is totally messed up, so I might as well take some calculated risk and get out there in the big scary world and try my hand at something that I've always thought about doing, but now I feel like I have the grit and courage to do it. And then really designing a plan. I provide one of the things I like about, not like about, but one of the things I try to aspire to in my writings and articles is actually give the reader something to do. There's a lot of great popular books out there that are inspiring, but they don't really tell you what to do. So I like to provide tools, and that's kind of one of the tools when it's associated with reinvention is really designing your own personal mission plan. And within each of those categories, you've redefined your values, or ensured that the values that you've defined for your life are authentic and you really emotionally connect to them. And redesigning your rituals to support those values. Having new rituals, especially in any type of reinvention scenario, things need to change. Like, so for example, when I just decided to make the obvious transition from financial analyst to SEAL, everything in my world had to change. It was a complete and total reinvention. My social life had to change. Not that it was great in the first place. My dietary habits, workout regimen, how I approach work, how I approach, social engagements, my time management, my sleep habits. Literally, it was a massive transformation, a massive reinvention. But because I was so committed and emotionally connected to that goal, it makes it easier and easier. So oftentimes when it comes to reinvention, it's not just about aspiring to pursue lofty goals that maybe for the wrong reasons, or maybe associated with the wrong set of values, or because someone else is telling us we should do it, but quite the opposite of finding things that we really value and care about and can be passionate about. It goes back to the motivation theory of passion, autonomy, and mastery. Those are kind of the three core tenets of what keeps us engaged and excited and rolling out of bed in the day. If we have those three elements in our life or career, then we're more likely to achieve more of those reinvention goals that we have set.
Got it. Great, thanks. So we're going to switch it to the Dory now, and I'm looking at the list of questions here. We have one from Tony here, and the question reads, what are some principles of change management that leaders seem to skip over or overlook, especially if time is a factor in the decision-making process?
Sure, that's a good question. It allows us to kind of expand on what we touched on earlier. Is simply put, a lot of organizations or teams, again, we might be talking about a massive transformation effort or a more iterative, shift in a project or the rollout of a new software, or whatever that transformation is. It's going to require many factors I'll get to in a minute, but we often start on, let's say there's 10 steps, we start on step 5 or 6 because it's got to happen now. Time is of the essence, and we're focused on the desired outcome, or there's pressures from external factors or shareholders or investors or anything that's forcing us to make sometimes less than well thought out decisions to execute more quickly, yet we're kind of stepping onto the battlefield ill-equipped to succeed. So the things that oftentimes organizations skip over are the people elements of that change initiative. Is our culture ready for this type of change? I know this because I've failed at this miserably when taking my 2 previous companies through relatively significant transformation initiatives. The other is understanding your level of engagement in the organization as it exists today, prior to launching into any type of change. If you have low engagement in the team, you will fail at any type of transformation initiative. It's just a given, because you really need, and this is not just my own opinion, but it's research-based, you need the engagement and participation from the majority, if not possibly all, maybe in a smaller team, of the members of that team to participate. Not everybody will have the same level of emotional connection, but you'll have and be able to instill what I call your change evangelists, who can, praise the change initiatives from the rooftops and engage the naysayers, or what I call the fence sitters. The people are kind of like, well, the people are waiting and seeing. We'll see, we tried this initiative or something similar last year, and it fell short, or the managers just forgot about implementing it, or maybe they did and they never updated anybody in the organization about its progress. That's one of the sort of nuances of changes. Oftentimes there is significant progress towards a transformation or change initiatives, but if it's not communicated through multiple channels and quite frankly over communicated over time, then both through formal and informal mechanisms, then people may not know about its progress. Therefore, they assume that it's a failure, a failed effort, or nothing's happening at all. So it's really about communicating the intent, enlisting the engagement of as many people as possible, and therefore measuring your current level of engagement. And if it's low, tackling that piece first if you can, or maybe simultaneously. And then also the other nuances that you'll get into sometimes quickly, if it's a significant change effort, is what I call combating battle change fatigue. Oftentimes change takes longer and has more significant hard and soft costs than we anticipate. So even your initial evangelists and the people who are super bought in oftentimes get fatigued because it is taking longer and they're not seeing everybody participating. And so they get discouraged about the possible outcome or when that outcome might be. And then, of course, competing priorities, managing those, because there always are going to be competing priorities just in the day-to-day, but especially when a team organization is trying to pivot, shift, or I said pivot, yeah, damn it. I'll do push-ups after this. But when a team's trying to go through any type of change, those competing priorities sometimes even further exacerbate the ability to succeed.
Yeah, and that sounds great. And actually, Jamie's question here actually touches on a little bit of what you just mentioned. And her question is, how does a company or team communicate change effectively to various levels or layers in the organization? Is there a model or framework on how companies do this effectively while minimizing risks?
Yes, good question. There's actually a whole chapter about this in the book because it is one of the most important elements of a successful change initiative. And it seems obvious, it seems self-evident that, well, communication, obviously, but where we get it wrong, especially as the large organizations, very matrix teams, lots of layers, lots of silos vertically and horizontally, that communication obviously gets more and more challenging. And I actually did a mathematical formula in the book about how, what even a well-intentioned communication strategy might be for any type of change initiative, where it's, it's in the newsletter, it's on the intranet, and it was mentioned at the company-wide meeting once a quarter, and well, that was about it. And if you think, oh, okay, that was, maybe 12 times throughout a year. But if you use also informal channels through what I call purpose-oriented owned and held accountable by managers, especially mid-layer managers, is purposeful storytelling, using more informal storytelling mechanisms for celebrating quick wins, talking about the progress towards those change initiatives. That's critically important, especially for not just enhancing the buy-in of people who are already bought in, but gaining the buy-in of people who are not. Because when you can celebrate quick wins, even in your battle plan, manufacture those quick wins. 30 days out, 60 days out, here's a quick win we know we can achieve, it's low-hanging fruit, and then let's celebrate it. And let's celebrate the people who led it and tell the story of why that initiative was important towards this ultimate mission success for the change initiative. Those are easy things that require no budget that we oftentimes skip over. So oftentimes the communication strategies get overcomplicated, and they go out and you hire a consulting firm and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for that communication strategy and internal PR, when oftentimes it's a behavioral shift towards telling better stories and celebrating better wins and recognizing people for their contribution towards the change. And that starts to shift behavior towards higher levels of engagement. And those who remain not bought in, if it's not coachable, they either have to be removed or will leave on their own.
Got it. Yeah, about that overarching narrative, reinforcing that narrative and bringing people along that journey. Makes sense. Makes sense. Great. So keep moving on here. So Sarah has a good question here. As Newton said, change has always been a part of Google and a part of the world at large. However, it seems that change is happening faster and faster. What's your perspective on the escalation of change and how best teams can handle this?
Yeah, it's a good question, and kind of one of the inspirations behind that book was just the fast-paced world of modern business that we're in, especially in organizations like the Googles of the world, who are technology focused and highly innovative. So there's not just those internal pressures for innovation and continued change and evolution, but the external pressures and competitive pressures and all the other things that the world places on an organization like Google. I mean, you know better than I do, but it's not going to slow down. not that I anticipate. So really, it's a matter of managing, in my opinion, priorities better. To put it as simply as possible. Oftentimes, we tell our clients, if you've got 10 priorities on this plan right here, you have no priorities. So really, it's about the prioritization of what a team is trying to achieve, and an executable plan that's time-bound and concise, and people understand exactly who's doing what and when. So there's accountability mechanisms in place, helps sort of alleviate the pressures of that rapid shift. Now, again, we've seen this all the time. Well, we have an initiative, we have a plan, we've got our task force or our committee or our team who's working on it, and then all of a sudden, word comes down from the top that we're doing something different. So those things, especially in fast-paced larger organizations, are just sort of a reality of just life and work and business, and that essentially ultimately really should be ideally owned from the top. As far as it kind of goes back to the competing priorities I talked about, you can have a well-intentioned team that is is adaptable, and they're bought in, and they're all in all the time. They're emotionally connected to what they're trying to do, even if they understand that plan might shift. But if we keep inundating them with shifting priorities, competing priorities, or inconsistencies in messaging from the top as to what those priorities are, you will inadvertently damage engagement and morale typically in an organization. So, and oftentimes that is one of the many burdens of command of the mid-layer of management, is protecting your team from some of those pressures from the top or from the sides in trying to keep your team focused on, on their initiatives, even though things might change. And then of course, when they do change, you have to do your best to communicate the intent, the purpose, and then give them the resources and remove obstacles.
Got it. Great. Yeah, we got a couple more minutes here. So I'll try to get maybe one, maybe two more questions in before we transition. So another question here from Sarah. Purpose seems somewhat inherently built into the SEALs. How do you bring purpose into or help employees connect with purpose within your business organization?
I think a great question, and something I've always been fascinated by because it can be quite a challenge. I mean, you think about the military or even, tier 1 special operations missions units, the purpose is pretty clear. We know what our mission is. We know why we exist. Actually, an interesting quick side story is that I mentioned the SEAL ethos, which is essentially a one-page culture manifesto. It's our mission, vision, core values, the reason why we exist, our purpose. Well, that wasn't even created until 2005. Not like back in the 60s when we were birthed as a special operations asset, but in 2005. Well, why? Well, because we never felt the need to define our purpose and who we are and use that for talent acquisition and onboarding and training and development and really identifying what our mission is until after 9/11. And we've been moving at the speed of war for 4.5 years until the powers that be were like, hey, we should probably, if well-run business organizations out there do this pretty well, we should probably think about defining our purpose and why we exist so that we can use that as a foundation for decision making. And essentially, in a best case scenario, everything we do. So this sounds very corporate. They literally held a 3-day offsite meeting with senior leaders from across NSW out at San Clemente Island with the goal of not leaving there until they had at least the foundation of what is now our ethos. Now, again, that's now 15 years old, and we've taken some polls, and the younger generations in the SEAL teams don't connect with the ethos. They think it's too long. So you're never going to please everybody. And of course, it depends on why your team or organization exists. Even in the SEAL teams, not everything we do all day long in any team environment is sexy. A lot of it's mundane. A lot of it's boring. A lot of it's work that is essential, but it's not what you think of when you're like, wow, I'm so glad I have this job, or so glad I work for this organization, or so thrilled to be on this team. A lot of it's hard work. A lot of it's boring. A lot of it's complex. A lot of it requires additional, learning and constant, development. And sometimes that goal is even kind of mundane. If we have one of our clients is, a law firm or an accounting firm, it's sometimes just the reality. It's harder to kind of really define that purpose. I will say, this is my biased opinion, that an organization like a Google, you have the power and the reach to define a really meaningful purpose that gets people out of bed in the morning. Not all organizations are equipped with that capability. So it's really about finding not just the general purpose, but also in your sort of micro world, in your teams or business units and divisions within an organization, also kind of more clearly defining for your team, what their purpose is as it connects to the larger mission of the organization. So maybe kind of finding a way to create a team charter and social contract around, the ultimate organizational goal, but also, where does our team fall in that? And then trying to find ways to connect them to that.
Got it. Great. So we'll go ahead and end it here in transition, but I definitely appreciate your time, Brent. It was really good to listen to all your different experiences and all the things you've learned and that you shared with us through this time. And then also from one veteran to another, thank you for your service. And with that, I'll toss it back over to Stuart.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thanks. Hey, before we say goodbye to you, Brent, I'll echo Larry's sentiments. Thank you for joining us this morning. Truly appreciated all of your insights and everything you had to say. But just so for our audience here, where can they find you? Where can they follow you going forward?
Sure. I'm on Instagram, just Brent_Gleeson, I believe. LinkedIn, our company website is takingpointleadership.com. And I think that's pretty much it. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for your time. It was a real honor and pleasure. Hopefully next time we'll be able to do this in person. But for now, this is what we got. Newton, thank you so much. Stuart and Jonathan, thanks for all the hard work in preparing for this event. Larry, great to meet you, and thanks for your help as well. So thank you, guys. Appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Brent. Appreciate it. Take care. Awesome. Great. And now for everybody else, we're going to transition here to a movement team break. Obviously, we've been going for about 90 minutes, so if you need to take a bio break, that's completely fine. But we are going to bring on right now, I believe, Laurel Witchman, one of our top Exos performance coaches. She's on the line right now. We're going to have her lead us in a movement team break. Laurel, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you, Stuart.
Awesome. And then this will go for about 10 minutes, everybody. Then we'll come on back. Don't leave, because we have a fantastic panel from REWS coming up here at the next part of our Change Management Summit. Laurel, over to you.
Awesome. Feel free to keep your cameras on or turn them off if you need, or that makes you feel more comfortable. Thanks for having me, Stuart. That was awesome talk from Brent. And I'm just going to take you guys through a little bit of movement. For those of you that I haven't met, my name's Laurel, and I'm a part of the coaching team for GFIT. So super proud to be a part of that team, and the way that we have pivoted to providing this platform online since work from home, and just the way that we're continuing to keep Googlers moving and healthy. So without further ado, I would like to invite you to join me on your feet. So take a break from your chair. I'll stand with you, and we'll just add a little movement. So nothing too crazy. Won't try to break a sweat or anything, so don't get scared. You can keep your chair nearby in case you might need it to hold on to, or maybe for balance. And then we're just going to start just with a couple big breaths and bringing some movement into the shoulders. So just relax the arms down next to your sides, feet directly under your hips. We'll take a big inhale, gaze up, reach the fingertips, take a big stretch overhead. Good. And then once you feel the breath, exhale, release the palms down towards the ground, and then stretch the fingertips towards the back of the room. So feeling a nice big stretch across the front of the chest. Good. 2 more times. Big breath. See if you can lengthen the breath every round. Good. Tapping the palms overhead, and then on the exhale, releasing, stretching, taking up space if you have it. Good. 1 more time. Biggest breath of the meeting. Inhale. Big stretch. See if you can release the shoulders away from the ears as you continue to pull the palms up towards the sky. Good. And then exhale, release. Nice. We're going to just come into a light march. You know, march, I thought, kind of fit the theme, like left, right, left, left. You know, whatever pace feels good for you, but just inviting some warmth into the body. You can bring the arms in with it. I know it feels weird to like pump your arms as you're walking in place or marching in place, but I promise it looks weirder to not. So just take my word for it. Opposite arm, opposite leg. You guys are movement specialists, a lot of you, so I'm sure you've already got that one down. Good. Maybe starting to bring the knees a little higher. If you're wearing tight pants, just be careful. Always just assume everyone on these meetings are wearing sweats, so the suit up top, sweatpants on the bottom. Good. We'll take a couple more breaths in this march, just inviting some warmth into the body. Good. And then release the feet, slow it down. Take the feet underneath the hips, and we're just going to come into a little squat flow. So what we'll do is squeeze the core tight, take a slight bend in the knees, and then hinge the hips back as you take the chest forward. So we're feeling a nice stretch in the back of the legs here. So kind of lengthening the hamstrings, big stretch, nice tall spine. You can reach the fingertips if that feels good for you. And then find a fold. So just fold, drop the forehead to the shins. You can keep a bend in the knees if you want. And then from this fold, sit the hips down and then take the chest up. Good. So keeping a nice long spine. It's okay if your hips are high. If you have that mobility to sit the hips low, really sitting low. And then challenge here. See if you can raise the right fingertips high. And now the left fingertips high. Keep the chest forward and then sit through the heels and stand tall. Good. 2 more times there. Squeeze the core tight. Send the hips towards the back of the room. Good. Keep the shoulders squared, wrapped around the spine. You're feeling a nice stretch in the back of the legs. Good. And then until you grab the toes, sit the hips low. You can walk the heels out nice and wide so that they're on the ground. Good. Let's reverse. Lift the left fingertips high and the right fingertips high, and sit through the heels and stand tall. 1 more time. Send the hips back. Good. You guys all move so well. Reach the fingertips in front. Big, long reach. Feel that stretch in the hamstring. Keep sending the hips back. Do lower the chest. Good. Dropping the hips low. Good. Last time here in the bottom of this squat, so take advantage of it. Really press the knees to the outsides of the room, finding that breath, taking it to those hips. Good. We'll reach the right fingertips high, the left fingertips high, sit in the heels and stand tall. Good. Shake it out. Let's take their right knee up. We're going to go into a little lunge flow now. So a little right knee, big hug, little balance that you need. So if you need to hold onto the chair, you can hold onto the chair. Good. And then we're going to release the leg and just send it long behind us. So you can step it back or maybe challenge yourself to take it all the way back into a lunge in one step. Good. You can drop the back right knee if you need, or you can keep the knee lifted. So whatever feels good for you. Let's reach the arms up tall. Good. Big breath here. Sitting into that front heel. Weight should be about equal in the lunge. Thighs are hugging in towards one another. Good. And then challenge. You can step that right leg back up to meet the left, or one big step, hugging the right knee into the chest. We have some yogis in their room. Let's go. Other side. Left knee. Big hug. Good. Keep the chest tall. Good, really lengthening. You might feel a little pinch in the front of that hip. That's okay. Good, and then same thing. Nice and slow and controlled, taking those left toes long behind you. Good, sitting into that front knee. You can drop that back right, left knee. Good, and then let's inhale, reach the arms up high. So just taking a second to let the hips stretch, lengthen back out. They get really short when we sit all day. Good, and then again, lifting that back knee if you have it, dropped, and then challenge, lean the upper body forward, one step, bring the left knee into the chest, big hug. Good, release that foot down, bring the feet together to touch. Last thing here, we're going to come into a tree pose. So I thought this kind of fit the theme of today. So let's root down through the left foot, root the left foot in the ground. If you need to hold on to something, or if you think you might lose your balance, make sure you have something nearby. And then we'll take the right foot. You can keep the toes on the ground, bringing it to the inside of the ankle, or maybe the shin. Try to avoid the knee, or maybe inside the thigh. Good. That right knee is opening towards the right. So the hips are opening here. And then we're squeezing everything in together, finding some balance. So we'll start with the hands in the center. Okay? So this like maybe would be like what you can control. So if you need to hold on to something, hold on to something. Good. We're rooting down through that left foot. Press the hands into one another to sort of activate that balance. And now we're going to grow the tree. So go ahead and grow your tree tall. Nice. Good. Take the hands apart, coming wide. Nice. So big, long tree. And now we have a big wind coming from the right. So we have to sway to the left. Good. See if you can keep that balance. Good. Shoulders forward. And back through center. Good. And now there's a big wind coming from the left. So we sway to the right. Good. Keeping that balance. And back through center. Good. Take the hands back in. Yeah, give yourself a pat on the back. That was awesome. Switch sides. Planting the right foot down, rooting into the ground as well as you can. We'll take the left foot to the ankle, the shin, or maybe the inside of the thigh. Good. Finding that nice strong position in the floor. Slight bend in the knee is helpful. And then we'll start by bringing the hands to center, pressing the palms into one another, sort of activating that balance. Beautiful. Good. And now we grow. Good. Continue to take those big breaths. Good. And then take your palms, spreading them wide, reaching them towards the sky. Good. You find that balance, and then here comes that wind from the left. Good. Reaching the fingertips to the right. Good. See if you can stay rooted. Back through center. Good. And here comes that wind from the right. Swaying to the left. Good. The more you shake, the more you're growing. So just remember that. Back through center. Hands together. Palms back under the chin. Release the left foot. Shake it out. And that's all I have for you. Awesome job. Thanks for participating. Hope everybody has a really great rest of their summit. Thanks, Stuart, for having me. Don't forget to move.
We're going to bring it back here for the second half of part 1. And just to let everybody know, there is going to be a part 2 of this summit. It's going to be next Tuesday in the afternoon. If you don't have an invite, just reach out to me. We'll get you one. That is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be featuring Dr. John Nagel, really, really fascinating individual who helped, again, comes from the military. We want to understand what we can about the VUCA environment from some people who've come from that world. But he was part of the team that essentially changed the military in the early 2000s and via doctrine and training, and really deals with high-level organizational change. Really fascinating individual. So I hope you can make it to that. We're also going to have some presentations from some leaders from around Google. They're also going to be talking about how change is affecting them. Before we get going, I have 2 pieces of little teeny trivia here. So I think you can see my screen here in just a second. Okay, the first one, drop the answers into chat, if you would. Drop the answers into chat. So we should, a butterfly's life cycle is made up of 4 parts: egg, larva, also known aka caterpillars, something blank, and adult. There's actually 2 names for this, 2 right answers for this one. Let's see, we got Chrysalis coming in, Chrysalis. There's another name that we're also missing here. Let's see what we got. We have Pupa and Chrysalis. There we go. There, Michelle and John coming in with that. Okay, here's one more. Also, change trivia. The study or collection of coins. See what we did there? Paper currency and metals is called. This is a tough one. This is a tough one. We might not. Whoa, my God, Ennis for the win. I did not. Of course, you got this. It's awesome. Numismatics from the French numismatique, also with Latin origin. Yes, Ennis for the win. Ennis. Thank you. Okay, everybody. With that, I am going to turn it back over to Larry Green, who's going to take us through our REWS panel. Larry, you there?
I am. Thanks
Awesome.
a lot for that. Really appreciated the stretch from Laura. My legs are awake now. I do have to admit, I was looking at myself on camera, and I can actually touch the ceiling a little bit, so that helped with my balance. So I don't know if that's cheating or not, but my legs are awake. So now we're going to switch gears. We're actually going to keep the conversation moving. We've invited a few of our leaders from our broader REWS organization. I'm going to introduce them here, but we're just going to jump in, have some questions. Again, I have a few starter questions for the team, but let me drop in the Dory link one more time because we're quickly going to involve everybody else. There we are. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and just start to drop those in to begin. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce everybody. So our first panelist is Relina Bulchalani, and I think I saw her on. Relina is one of our leaders in the business partner space. And for those who aren't as familiar, our business partner team is the group in REWS that interacts directly with our different product areas on all things workplace services. We partner closely with our different leaders in the PAs, and Relina works specifically with the Google Cloud team. So she works with, there you are, perfect. Yes, and so Relina works with our cloud team to just help our leaders there navigate all things workplace service. So welcome, Relina. Cool. Next person here is David Dvorak, and I think I saw David online, but yeah, there we are. See you waving.
I'm here.
David leads our global events, guest services, and amenities program. So all things when it comes to events, the guest experience. So when a visitor comes on board or a guest comes on to visit us, how that happens. And granted, in the year 2020, that's a very different experience than it was a year ago with that. And so we'll dive into that. But welcome, David. Cool. Next person here is Ennis, Mr. Pneumatics. I think I pronounced that wrong, but But Enes, he leads our innovation aspect for the food program. So he thinks about the future, specifically with the food program, but it quickly branches into other aspects of global programs. And he's been very, very active right now. I've been personally working with him on a few projects, but reimagining the future. What does the world look like once we're on the other side of this COVID-19 situation? So welcome, Enes. Cool. And then the last person, I did want to just make a quick mention about Rob Dahlgren. He was going to be one of our panelists, but unfortunately he could not make it today. He leads our global programs experience and design team. So just the look and feel of our experiences in the space itself. He and his team, they work on that, but hopefully he can be involved here in the future. And so I just wanted to welcome all of our panelists. Again, if anybody has questions, you can just drop them into the dory. But I did want to get ourselves started here. This is just for our panelists, and we'll just open it up for any of you to jump in and answer this. But this first question to get us started is, can you share specific examples of current changes which would have happened but are being accelerated by the pandemic?
Larry, should I go ahead and jump in? Hi, everyone. Yeah. Wonderful to be here today. Thank you for that movement break. Similar to Larry, I really needed it, and I really enjoyed the morning as well. I thought the session was powerful. Took some really good notes here on accountability and trust. So I appreciate that as well. But I'll quickly take the question. From my perspective, as Larry shared, being part of this hinge role between the business and REWS and translating on both sides, bringing business intelligence back to REWS, it's definitely been a journey. And one of the ways that REWS was already starting to pivot is really starting to think about customizing for business needs. So Google's created amazing spaces and services globally for over the last almost 2 decades. But what I saw over the last year or so, we started pivoting and really understanding business needs. I think the pandemic came in and we have really, that pivot has happened much faster. The need to customize, the need to really understand where our different product areas are going. So what a Google Cloud might need might be very different to what an ads might need. And one specific example is we've been on a journey with Google Cloud to just rethink how they work. Come up with more shared desking, more collaboration zones, have Google Cloud sales teams spend more time with the customer. And the pandemic's come around, everyone's been working remotely while we've been working on all this work. And it's just made us realize we can do this. We still need community, we still need connection, we still need innovation. But this has definitely accelerated REWS delivering a much more agile workplaces, much more shared desking. So it's just been a great journey, but I've really seen this pivot in REWS where I've never seen leaders so keen to understand where the business is going and adapt and provide services and spaces for the business.
Great. Yeah, Enes, David, any thoughts on that question? Anything that's accelerated?
I mean, I could just be more specific in regards to how a team is affected by this. And really what we were doing in the global events world was working toward a globalization of our event processes and experiences for the events and event hosts. When the pandemic hit, that accelerated that rather quickly, and accelerated in a couple ways. We had to quickly understand how things were changing, anticipate those changes, and how that would affect our organization. So we had always thought that part of globalization meant that we needed to globalize our organization, structure it effectively to meet those specific needs. So when the pandemic hit, we realized that we were shifting immediately from a physical environment of events to a fully digital environment. We then quickly shifted and reorganized our organization quickly to meet those specific needs, knowing that eventually this would probably be the way we would end up anyway. But to do that in a rapid amount of time allowed us to really shift our focus and be able to deliver digital events, which, you know, in the event world, which people think it's a easier process to deliver a digital event. It actually takes us twice as much time, sometimes 3 times longer to actually deliver on a digital event for many reasons that I'm not going to go into. But, you know, people tend not to understand that. And for us to be able to do this digitally, this globalization piece and change to that was instrumental in being able to deliver things that you may see, whether it be the TGIF or earnings call or other events that are out there that can't use the Meet tool to actually conduct their meetings.
Got it. Yeah, there's a lot that goes on behind the curtain, literally, with that. Ennis, did you want to answer that one?
Yeah, but one thing that's really accelerated for us on the food team is, we had actually already started conversations last year in large partnership and in fact response to working with Relena and the cloud team to think about it's not just food at the office, it was really food while working. And so as we have more and more teams, particularly cloud and the sales teams, for example, out in field, or as we have more people traveling or working in other locations, outside of our office, we've been thinking about what does the food program look like? And so COVID has actually acted as an accelerant to many of the conversations we had started last year and helping us reimagine what some of that future looks like.
Got it. Great, great. And I'm actually going to flip over to the door here. Catherine has a good question. And David, you actually touched a little bit on this, but actually we'll start with Relena, with you on this question. And this question says, if you could go back in time to pre-COVID days and do one thing differently when leading your team during this uncertain time, what would you change?
Thanks, Larry. Sorry it took a second to unmute myself. That's a really good question. I think the one thing I would change is the journey that we were already on, which is really bringing the power of REWS to our partners. And I've got an incredible team. Hopefully they might be on this call today. I think I saw one of them this morning, a small team. But really, everyone I work with in REWS across health and performance, global programs, strategy ops, we just have such talent and such diverse skills. So even bringing that earlier to the table, I think I would really kind of enhance my team with the power of REWS. And I think I'm doing that very consciously right now for a number of reasons. I think we're a small team, and I also think that this is the time you want folks from REWS at the table, reimagining, co-creating with our clients. So I think that would be, I hope I answered your question. It's more around bringing the power of REWS versus kind of managing my team differently. But I think the business partners, part of this role, I think they know every day can be slightly different because you can be working on a global strategy for the CEO of Google Cloud. And then that morning you come into work and something totally different happens, like what we're dealing with, unfortunately, the wildfires, et cetera, in the Bay Area, where we are pivoting so quickly to make sure Googlers are safe, they feel connected to us, they have some environment to thrive. So I think the business partners have always had that kind of waking up. They've got their core objectives, but there's always this ability to be pulled in a different direction and to pivot. So I think the pivot's even stronger now. And for me, it's really bringing the power of DRS, GSRS, REWS to show what REWS can really do for our clients as they reimagine their futures.
Yeah, that's great. And for those that I know, like with COVID-19, it's brought a bunch of pivot opportunities organizationally. And I actually have been working more with the business partner team. And so for me, it's been a great experience to get a free look, to almost in a way step into the future to get insight on what our product areas are thinking about, how they process, different challenges. And with that, and this is similar, David, on your side, a couple other members of your team have been helping out the cloud team as well. When we're forward positioned, one thing I've learned is that when we're forward positioned with the business partner team, we get that free look. But also the thing that I've been able to experience is that my rabbit ears are going to be perked up anyway for health and performance types of things. Just like David on your side with Megan and her team, the ears are going to be perked up anyway. And so as we help the product area lead navigate the different challenges that come up, we're going to reach into our respective networks to be able to help solution or bring together, answers to whatever it is they're trying to solve for. So that's one thing I've been able to experience, that there's a lot we have here with REWS, and having that present or forward deployed to help the product area leads see that is pretty cool. But either Ennis or David, any thoughts with that? If you were to go back in time, and I guess I'll caveat that with, you don't know what you don't know. So if you go back in time not knowing that a pandemic is coming, is there anything that you would change?
Yeah, one thing, one adage that I like is a story about the three fish. Two young fish are swimming along, and an older fish comes by and says, "How's the water?" And the two young fish said, "What's water?" And I love that story from this moment, because what are we taking for granted? What are the things that we just assume are always going to be the same, that we're starting to lose sight of? And I think if we had a little more acknowledgement of some of the things we take for granted, one being the places we design and operate, two being the way that our teams all use the same services, we might have actually started some of this transformation more quickly.
Yeah, and I think that to add to it, it's a great point. It's the way I look at this. I wish, if I knew something differently, was to be more focused on the health and well-being and the collaborative nature that the pandemic has forced upon us in a very good way. So when you look at the positives that's come out of this, I know my team has been much more connected because of it. There's been more focus and concern about each of the individual's well-being. And this is something that was sorely missing because we didn't have that forced narrative to meet in, unfortunately, these computers. But we're running around from place to place. And while you can do that in a collaborative sense, it's not always a way that you can connect as an entire team. So it's something that's made me think a little bit differently about as we move forward to continue that momentum of the focus on health, well-being, and collaboration and connection points between team members.
Got it. Great.
Larry, I wanted to add just one quick point from our leadership to David's point. What we're really hearing from Google leaders, and these are senior leaders, what's keeping them up is really well-being on the team as well, because everyone has different circumstances. Some people are very productive in this new world. They've got the structure to be successful, and other folks are really struggling with the connection, the community, taking work, life, home boundaries, etc. And I was so thrilled when this leader, he turned around and told me, so I said, "What are you missing the most?" And I was assuming he was going to say food. And he said, "I really miss my monthly massage, my walking one-on-ones on campus, and just taking off and hitting the gym, at some time that I can find time in my calendar." And I was so happy because I was like, this person acknowledged that the team is really struggling on some levels, but also really acknowledged your team. And he said that massage, I'm really missing that, Relina. And I'm like, we've got to, my rabbit ears went up and said, how do we deliver this to folks in a different, innovative way? Because obviously if a senior leader is feeling this, I'm sure people in the organization, but David, to your point, well-being is kind of top of mind for actual product area leadership as well. It comes up really often in our conversations.
Yeah, great point. I can relate to what you're saying, Relina. I know I personally miss the Versa Climber. For those of you who know, I've actually probably talked too much about that machine, but yeah, just having that aspect to your life is a big thing. So cool. We're going to move on now to the Dory. Ryan has a good question here, and this is about communications. And David, we'll start with you on this one. What are some best practices you've learned in how to effectively communicate change to your team or your peers?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned very clearly, and we learned this probably earlier in the process because it was, as we had started out, obviously there was a lot of change that happened rather quickly. And obviously in those circumstances, you end up doing things that probably are not in the best way possible. So we figured out over a period of time was to be very, very clear on the objective of what we wanted to accomplish so that everybody knew where we were going and there was no gray area in regards to that. So I think from that, side of it, that was the important piece. I think the secondary piece to that we also found out through trial and error was we needed to, before moving forward on anything, to really reach out and see who may else be doing the same thing or something similar. What transpired over time were multiple work streams doing the same things or not overlapping. That was just not also internal to us in global events in some of our other areas. We're doing the same thing. And then we reached out further to find out that it was happening throughout global programs. And I think the key for us was to research for acting and then act upon what our goal is moving forward.
Got it. Yeah, and it's related. Any thoughts on that? And again, the question is just best practices around communicating change. What best practices have you learned and how to effectively communicate change to your team or your peers?
Absolutely. Larry, one of the things that I am a big fan of, I think folks have heard of this, it might be a little old school, but John Cotter, who talks a lot about leading change and talks up front, and it's an 8-step process, and a lot of it is pretty obvious, but he shares, and this is like a change evangelist from Harvard Business School who spent a lot of time working with corporations on change. He says spend 75% of your time on the first couple of steps, which is really setting the vision, building the allies, creating communication channels. The rest will follow. Folks will cross the chasm, but you have to get that alignment up front. And I think that's been critical. I think our cloud team, to their credit, we've been on a journey because cloud has a new CEO who's really been forcing change. They've been building the plane while they've been flying it. It's a very competitive space with Amazon and Microsoft. And not to get too detailed, but I think the team's already been on a change journey, but really upfront communicating it. I really like to spend days on strategy sessions. Like we have this amazing opportunity ahead of us to be part of this change. How do we engage with the client? How do we bring REWS to the table? How do we pivot? Because the client's asking us to do things we've never done. So really to Cotter's point, and if anyone's not familiar with the work, there's some great stuff on the web and there's some really condensed stuff, like 2-3 page papers on his entire books. It's really, so that's something we've been doing extensively, being on this change journey, inspiring different leaders in the org about what's going on with Google Cloud, including my team, to feel there's an opportunity, to Brent's point, to feel you have a purpose, right? You're part of something really important. And you were there early and upfront, like the folks who were at Google 18, 15 years ago, they must have felt they were at this inflection point. And I feel we're at this inflection point in cloud. So it's just really doing that work. And it's a big investment, and it's a very conscious investment you do up front.
Being intentional about that. Makes sense. Great. Any other additional thoughts on that?
Yeah.
No worries if you don't.
One additional thought here is to look for the translators in the organization. That's not necessarily the leaders. If you find people who are particularly in their day-to-day roles sitting between groups, and having to translate regularly between, if you think of like a tech team between business and engineering, those are the people who can help you think about how to effectively communicate change with the various audiences.
Yeah, that makes sense. Keeping the audience in mind, communicate to comprehend is a phrase I learned in the military a while back. Knowing the message and being able to articulate that message to whoever it is you're talking to, or who the audience is. Makes sense. Great. And Ennis, we'll get you started on this next one here. This question is from Sid. And this question is, how does the health and performance team reach consensus between offering a quick minimal viable product or program sooner versus a higher quality one later? Is meeting Googlers where they are at, is meeting Googlers where they're at swiftly about the amount of change required to polish or refine it down the line?
That's a really great question. The most important thing you can do when speed is, of the essence, is to really think about purpose. What is it you're actually trying to accomplish? And the piece that's often missed, particularly from an innovation lens, is this assumption that we have to test a fully baked idea to know that it's the right idea. And actually, there's usually some critical foundational questions that you need to answer first. And that's really all you need to build your MVP towards. So the first thing to ask yourself is, given the current situation, what is the most critical thing for us to answer to move one step forward, not 10 steps? So in the context of COVID and immediate change that we've been confronted with, it's not so much what is the future of all digital platforms. The question is, what can I give somebody now at home that's going to help me build better programs in the future? And that can start with give them a class and find out what worked or didn't. It doesn't have to be build the right platform. So really focusing and narrowing on what is the one next question we need to answer to advance our work can help you move quickly, but also identify the right movement forward.
Yeah, and that also, in a way, it kind of takes the pressure off, because if you understand what we're trying to solve for, and then just be curious and just go on that learning journey, you'll discover different things, and I think natural pivot points will come up along that journey. David or Relina, any thoughts on that?
I think Ennis covered it really well.
Great. Yeah. Cool. Moving on now. So we got another question here from Danielle, and it's about transparency and trust. And so, David, we'll have you start on this one, and then Ennis and Relina, you can chime in. How do you use transparency or any other strategies to build trust with your teams during change?
I think it's a great question, and stuff that we've worked on or are working on, because it's never an end journey. It's a continuous journey. And where we try to be transparent is, you try to make sure that everybody understands where you are, where you're going. But I think from a leadership perspective, the act of being vulnerable is a key piece of being truly transparent, because when you're vulnerable and you show that vulnerability, it allows your team to feel that, one, you're real, and you really are opening up to them. And that, again, tends to build that psychological safety within a team, and continues to foster more and more people that will reach out and be vulnerable. But until you as a leader can do that and show that, then again, I don't think you can move the organization further. And, from my perspective, it's not one of those things that you can be vulnerable once. It has to be a pattern that you continually show over a period of time, because the flash in the pan mentality doesn't work or sit well with individuals. So again, once they see that opening in moving forward, and then they fully believe in that transparency for yourself, your team, and the organization.
Yeah. Lifestyle pattern, vulnerability, it's powerful. And it's Relina?
Yeah, I'd love to add just 2 points. One is building on David's, you talk about vulnerability. I show up about showing up authentically. So really, you show up as an authentic person, leader, you talk about what's going on in your life on a consistent basis. And you also show up with a growth mindset where you don't have all the answers. These are unprecedented times, right? No one thought of this. Google's very good at dealing with incidents globally, but no one thought of something of this magnitude happening at the same time globally, right? And the impact on everyone. Where I think where you don't have all the answers, but you communicate often, you share what you know. I mean, one thing that helped, I think, my team up front is we just had these daily stand-ups where my manager, my senior director, was doing it on a regular basis. And that really helped us to just really stay connected to the folks. You don't have all the answers, but you're trying to solve together as a group. And David, I can't agree with you more, just showing up vulnerably. This has been incredibly hard, because I don't think this perfect storm of, for some folks, for me, young children at home, trying to lead at Google, trying to be there for my clients as they look to us to say, help us with our return to office, help us with the, our teams are struggling, help us figure it out. So you have to also show up as a leader for them. But I think just being transparent is incredibly critical. And what I love about Google is Google does want you to show up as your authentic self. And my manager told me early, you don't always have to push your kids out. If they come in for a second, it's okay. Just calm them down and we can move on. So it made me relax a little bit, and I like to check in a lot. And just a quick shout out to Larry, he's joined our team, which has been a wonderful experience, a growing experience for us. And he introduced us to a concept called authentic relating, where we start a meeting with sharing something personal. It can be something confident. It can be something you want to open up to the team about what you're going through. And that has just changed our tone of meetings. Because one thing I do feel is because of COVID, our meetings tend to be a little bit more transactional. You get on with the leader, you talk, you have an agenda, and then you get off. You don't have those little moments of connecting with people before and after meetings. And this has really helped our team even become more transparent, this authentic relating exercise, which he can tell you more about.
Great. Ennis, any thoughts? I do have some thoughts on that, but I'll give it to Ennis.
The second what Relina and David shared, it really does come down to build that trust and transparency as one of authentic relating and one of just being vulnerable and showing up. And I think Certainly the current circumstances offering a lot of opportunities to do that, but I think doing that as consistently as possible also creates a space for others to realize we're not superhuman. We're all still relating to this experience in our own individual ways, and you can build that trust by just being honest about it.
Yeah, great point. And back to Relina's point about authentic relating. For me personally, this year, obviously, like with everybody, has been a dramatic year on many levels for many people. For me, the theme of courage has been my overarching theme, because obviously work is happening in a different way. But one thing I'm seeing in myself, not only how I show up on screen here at work, but just in other areas of life, is how can I grow in the domain of courage? And it practically gets down to how vulnerable can I be, and having the courage to be vulnerable. And for me personally, there are a bunch of internal as well as external opportunities to be vulnerable. For example, like all the social justice issues that are happening in the world today. Those topics affect me deeply. And so I can act and pretend like those don't necessarily affect me, and still do my work, still do whatever we need to do. But just taking those quick moments, doesn't have to be long, just to acknowledge what's going on in the world and how it can touch and affect me. It just definitely opens things up to the next level. So
Larry, I'll add on to that, building on what you said. It makes me think of the quote that courage is not the absence of fear, but the assessment that there's something greater than fear that needs to be addressed. And I think if you dial back the intensity of that statement a bit, thinking about the current situation, it's not so much that leadership is this absence of uncertainty, but rather leading in spite of it. And so thinking about how we can show up not knowing what we need to do, but still finding ways to work on that together and build our way forward together as a team.
Yeah, it's funny. One thing I was thinking about when Brent was talking earlier, just about change, in my experience, you can be more change ready when you work on change internally, because like what we're all working with now when it comes to our roles and with REWS and everything, it's a lot of external things that are outside of our personal selves. But the thing I'm personally learning is that the more willing I am to work on the things that I need to change within my character, my life, marriage, kids, etc., it helps me to be more apt or more flexible or more agile to be change ready, or to help lead and change and do those things when it comes to change externally from myself. So how I show up on the screen organizationally, with what different things are happening there. So yeah, great. So now I'm going to pivot it back here. And again, people can put more questions in the dory. I got a bunch of questions. I really enjoyed this here. But one question I have is when we think about our different product areas, or the different peers or colleagues or groups that all of you may connect with, the question is this: when it comes to change this year, who is responding particularly well? What have you seen from other REWS or Google or Alphabet organizations or partners that we might emulate from them?
I can jump in here, and I'll give you two perspectives. I think one is a slightly more serious perspective, but I think it's a very important perspective. So as we've seen everything that's going on, and you talked about social justice and what's going on in this country, one thing I've really been inspired and impressed by Google Cloud is the leadership came together really quickly to create a council to think through what's going on in the social justice, diversity, representation, inclusion, belonging. And they really quickly came up with about three, four work streams. And folks obviously leaned into it, but it wasn't a one-time effort. I've attended a bunch of different all hands through the org, whether it's a tech leader, whether it's a sales all hands last week. And they've really got this consciousness, which is top of mind. And the way they came together inspired me, the way they're leading the work streams, how inclusive they're being with kind of soliciting different ideas. And I really believe it's the first time in my time at Google I've seen this systematic and structural change ahead of us, which was very inspiring to me, because it wasn't another conversation. And it wasn't another, we need to change this aspect. It was a holistic view. And that really inspired me to just see it was less about COVID, it's more about what's going on in the country, but it all comes together and impacts us. And I think in REWS for me, I've just been so inspired by all of DRS, by the way, all the teams have pivoted so quickly to come together and say, prioritize what's top of mind. We all were going down paths with our OKRs, with, making impact on our clients, but really taking a step back and saying, my project might not be the most important project right now. I've got to pivot. And I've seen teams do that. I've seen leaders do that really well. I've seen, Jen Kelly's staff kind of restructure and repivot our OKRs. And I think I've been really inspired by that Brewster's ability to just say, okay, I'm going to back off this and completely change and get behind returning to office safely, get behind the different initiatives we're working on. So on the client side, it was less about COVID, and on our side, it was more about COVID. But both have really been kind of inspiring to me is how they've set a vision, they've got a clear strategy, and now they're on the execution plans. It's not just inspiring and leaving it up there. It's really all the way executing and trying to get feedback back in.
Got it. Great. David or Ennis, any examples?
I mean, I think from my perspective, because I've worked for numerous organizations in my career, overarching for me is the way Google has handled this, how Google has been ahead of it in a very, very quiet fashion. They didn't try to make splashes. They didn't try to put themselves in the publicity realm, which a lot of companies do. And they really took a lot of initiatives for the care of the individuals at Google and continued that work behind the scenes to develop plans for moving forward to support, Googlers globally. So to me, that's been the most impressive thing coming from someone. I'm only 2 years at Google and working for other corporations. That wouldn't have been the play moving forward. So very impressed with the way they've handled the entire situation so far. And I thank them, obviously for all the efforts that they put in and the days off that we're getting. So that's great.
Yeah, I would plus one that too, David. Back when we were back in March, April, when all this was happening, it felt like as we were, figuring out all of this to, should we pause things, pause services, close down sites, et cetera. As I look around, different friends or people in other companies or different areas of life, it felt like being at Google that we were like, in my opinion, at least 4 to 6 weeks ahead of everybody else in terms of decision thoughts or what to do, or, kind of a little bit further ahead, and doing it in a way that is not in a showy sense, but to really just be deliberate and really just think through. And obviously we don't have all the variables answered or don't have the answers, but being willing to make, certain calls on certain topics, and acknowledging that, we may need to switch it and pivot in another direction if something changes. So, so that's, definitely can relate to that. Ennis, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I echo very much what David said around how Google has responded. I found it just unbelievably impressive, and to talk with other colleagues in my network and what they're experiencing compared to what we're experiencing, it's a pretty stark difference. And I really think that comes from how anchored we are as a culture around individuals. How do we help people, be better people? How do we help them do their job more effectively as individuals, not just in service to the company? The one thing I'll add, and it's perhaps a bit self-serving in that it's food related, but I think so many of our operations teams across REWS, all of you certainly here with health and performance as well, have done such a fantastic job of being able to respond quickly and to really think creatively about what we can do differently. It's also, amazing to see the scale at which some of our operations like the food team operate at, and how quickly they've been able to pivot into new ideas globally. Just what they've been able to do. And it's just, impressive to see what we're able to do with such a small number of people, really, from a strategic lens in planning through how we respond, how we act, and what we can do next.
Great. Yeah, so this next question here is from Newton. And Relina, we'll start with you on this, but we'll go around the screen. So we'll go Relina first, and then David, and then Ennis. As one of Health and Performance clients, how can we better serve you and your people to help them sustain their own health and performance during this really tough time? You have us as a captive audience.
Well, that's a really good question. And it goes back to what Larry was saying earlier, that you have to kind of work on yourself, your own purpose, your own life, which permeates through work, etc. And I think one thing that, similar to what Ines and David said, I've been so impressed by the ability of this team to pivot, whether it is online aligned sessions through Appointee, whether it is the classes you rolled out, the HIT School scholarship programs, just the ability to just take all these things that were available to us in person and say, hey, I can meet you somewhere. You want to do it in person? Great. You want to be on a class with your camera off? Wonderful. You want to be a one-on-one? I'm more a one-on-one person. That's just, I like personal training and those kind of things because it's very dedicated and one-on-one. And you've kind of done it, So I have just been so inspired by the way, the Googlers have pivoted. I don't know everything the food team's doing to pivot. I'm working closely with events, but health and performance is just, you're meeting us where we are. And I think that's critical. The only thing I would add is maybe if there's a way to amplify the storytelling, and I think there are things you're doing, but let Googlers know this is available. Let's say we can meet you where you are, whichever one of these avenues work for you, because it's not a one size fits all. Because I didn't know some of this till Larry, you had a session, and I think Sarah was on our session and explained that these are the different things you can do. And I find nuggets along the way. I did a Women at DRS event, a coffee chat, and there were 3 massage therapists who attended it. They might be on this. And they told me this is what else is available to you, when you're getting stressed out, etc. So for me, I think we're doing amazing things. There are platforms, meet people where they are and amplify your story. I keep thinking of that, even what we're doing with David and team. How do we amplify that for other product areas? How do we let Googlers know we're here to help you through this journey?
Yeah.
Plus one to Relina and storytelling. I think amplifying the story, particularly as it relates to the food team, recognizing a focus on wellness has so many different connective points to our overall, every day we have so many different elements that are impacting our well-being, and being able to take what you all know from the health and performance side and really help tell that story and how it connects into things like food or connects into other experiences that people are having throughout the day so that they can better support their well-being. It just helps us be more effective in what we're delivering as programs.
Yeah, I think it's +1 to everything. I think one of the things, Berlina said that's important, and has also talked about it, is the narrative and ensuring that we can really get the narrative out of there. What we're dealing with from an event perspective is what's called digital fatigue. Digital fatigue obviously has set in, and people are trying to find different ways to reduce that fatigue, because the experience and what individuals are trying to get out of an event is being quickly diminished because of digital fatigue. So how do we partner as a global program organization to use health and fitness, food, to deliver something different that's not out there, and do that on a scaled basis? That would be my ask, because it's great we can do a lot of these one-offs in a small variety, but how do you do it in a scaled sense? Because we're getting to a point where we talk about, in our world, the digital tsunami. So we're doing 3 or 4 times as many events as we ever have, because we don't have physical restraints of space anymore. So people can do as many events at the same time on the same day as they want. And with that, we're seeing, as we go back into a hybrid, which is a half digital, half physical environment, and we think that's the next tsunami that's coming our way. So how do you basically put some programs at scale to deliver on that, and not be reactive to it, but be proactive in what we can offer and build a narrative around that?
Yeah, great. The questions like these, I get energized by them, because when you think about that, I also think about Google Geist. So before, if I'm remembering this correctly, before COVID-19 was a thing globally, I believe that well-being was an issue anyway. And then obviously it has become more of an issue since COVID-19 has happened, since all of our worlds are in a way turned upside down. And so that's a huge clue that well-being is a thing. And then there's a bunch of ways to unpack well-being in a bunch of different contexts and ways. And I think from there, back to what you were saying, Relina, with our narrative and our story, I think it's like the time of the day has really given us a really cool prompt to say that, hey, this is our stage to really be able to show up even more, not only just as health and performance, but health and performance plus food plus events. Like, what are the right combinations to help create the right solutions for the cloud leadership team as they navigate things? So great. Another question here from Sid. Thank you, Sid, for this. We'll start with you on this one, David. This is regarding screen fatigue. Considering how much time people spend in front of a screen, whether it's work or free time, what are other H+Ps or REWS teams doing to improve well-being without using videos or sites or GVC? Any thoughts that you have on that one?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we're trying to do is create much more of interactive third-party tools to provide different services for that. So we have a whole work stream around identifying what tools we could use in a visual environment that creates much experience. So, think about, you're doing an event, but you go to reception. How do you get that experience of being in a reception with multiple people to be able to move around a room or use your screen to shift around the room and see what else is going on? And that's the stuff that we're starting to think about now. So while you can't necessarily get away from the screen, it's a much more interactive piece. And what we've learned, obviously, from how people are engaged in a lot of the definitely my kids and all these video games, it gives that video game essence to a meeting to really break up what would normally be a straightforward stare at a screen piece, or something on the screen that says it's time for you to get up and move around, come back, etc. It's also what we're trying to teach when we provide information to event hosts. Then we look at that's the first thing we ask, we look at their agenda. And we basically say, this agenda is just going to wear your individuals out. Here's what we would suggest as part of that, based on behavioral science, which we study pretty well from our vendor partners on how meetings are conducted in both a digital sense and physical sense, and what works well in a behavioral science sense. So I think it's a work in progress, Larry, but I don't think we have immediate answers, but we're definitely understanding that we're going to be in this for the long haul, whether it's in a hybrid sense or a digital sense. So we need to have some solutions to that, and that's what we're exploring.
Yeah, one thing I'm reminded of is one pattern that I've done. I've actually done this with some people on screen here, is breaking up the day, and I just call it with some throwback activities, quote unquote recess. So like literally getting up after you get intake, whatever we need to do for the meeting, but there's a little middle school near where I live, and just going over there, just shoot a couple baskets, just to physically just do something, or go do some push-ups, or just physically do something to remove yourself from the screen, and then you come back. We all know where to find each other. We're just a click away. So doing things like that, like a throwback to the 80s, or dare I say the 70s for me with that. And so Relina, any thoughts of that?
Yeah, one thing I've been doing more is just phone calls with people. There are some conversations that really actually are a little easier to just do as a phone call, and I'm finding that break in the day is also helping my brain get the kind of different stimulus that it needs, and getting away from the screen is helpful for me. I have actually, for me personally, it's really hard to sit just confined to the screen. So having a phone call where I can walk around the house, go for a walk, while take the dog with me, and actually get something done at the same time is both productive, but also giving me a bit of a mental break from the fatigue of the screen.
Yeah, that's another throwback solution, a phone call for using the phone to talk on. That's a new idea. Relina, go ahead.
Yeah, Larry, I was reading an article, speaking of phone calls, how we are such an always on culture. And there's a burden for always being on. Like, you've got to show up, you've got to be presentable, you've got to have your, Google's culture is video on. There's no, I came from another tech company, and it wasn't a video on culture, even though they had WebEx, which is a big collaboration product like Meets. But it really is, it takes a toll. And it's literally building in. And Larry, you've been great at doing this with our team, like really scheduling time to take, I used to have something, and I shared this with some of the women who might be on this, dream time, just setting up time to really do some thinking, do some planning, think about innovation, taking a break and saying, what could this look a couple of years from now? We don't build in those times. So I think for me, what I'm trying to do more is just build in breaks of just thinking that this, always being on takes a hit on you. I found March and April completely exhausting because of just the videos, the getting ready to get the right Googlers on the right lists, and constantly being on, constantly being pinged on weekends. And I think you've got to kind of, I force my kids to take breaks, but I never force myself to take breaks, right? I'm like, go out and play, get off your devices. And how do we do that with ourselves? And Google has some great tools. Like I've implemented something now in the evenings where my screen changes color at 10 p.m. So I have to be off it. It's just small things that you can do to intervene and just be conscious. Larry, I think the key is really being conscious. Thinking about what's working, getting intuitive, saying, is this serving me? Is constantly being on these video calls all day and then having to deal with, my neck and all this physical therapy. Like, how do you balance that? Maybe go do some walking one-on-ones and let people say, I'm going to be off video. I just need to go get some fresh air. And I don't do that, but you've inspired me now to think about that.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah, good. This next question here gets into mindset with this year. And the question is, what mindset changes have you embraced as a leader to help yourself navigate these uncharted waters? Mindset shifts that you've had, and I got an immediate thought that I have, and then any of you can jump in. Initially, when this started, I did draw back upon my military days of being on deployment and just that experience. Because when you're on deployment, you're separated from your family. You're quote unquote sheltered in place to a degree because you're only around a certain amount of people and you're doing the same thing over and over. One thing with a deployment is that there is an end date, and so you can kind of calibrate yourself to that. But one thing that I used to do when I was in a deployment situation is understand what I need to do, and then from there begin to set up different routines or rituals, as Brent was talking about earlier, rituals around work, and then for me, rituals, a lot of you know me, around sports and exercise, because I need to have my recess time. And then rituals around, I'll just call it with others. So relationship types of things. And then just getting lost in that and really trying to, try to stay true to it as much as possible. And then in a deployment situation, before you know it, it's almost time to come back home. In a pandemic situation, there is no end. Well, there's an end date hopefully coming. We just don't know what it is right now. But that's one thing that I have been doing in terms of mindsets, understanding my routines, key things that I need, and beginning to practice those. So any thoughts on mindset?
Yeah, building on what you shared, Larry, I think we're seeing more communication or more acknowledgement, I think, in the broader context out in the world right now, that recovery doesn't really begin until something's ended. And because this hasn't ended, we're not really in recovery. And therefore, we don't really have that opportunity to recharge the way that I think we all had anticipated or hoped we would be able to, say, 2 or 3 months ago. And as a result, it means that we're depleted in deeper ways than maybe we're used to, and not able to replenish kind of the reserves that we've often had to help us get through that extra surge or that extra moment or that extra 10% more that we need to do in a particular day. And so I think for me, just acknowledging that that's where we're at makes it easier for me to take breaks during the day now and to walk away and say, I'm going to take these 10 minutes because I actually need this in order to reset, versus sticking with it and trying to push through to try and just get that one extra thing done. Recognizing that we're going to have to recover in different ways and find new ways of doing that as we go has shifted the way that I'm approaching literally every day now.
Yeah, I think I can definitely echo that. One of the mindsets that I really initially had to really hold on to was that uncertainty was certain. And until I was able to grasp that every day was not going to be as I had planned, and that I knew that I had to shift off of that, that made me feel much more comfortable. And then as we went along, there was the thought that we basically had to take risks, and they were essential to delivering solutions in this new environment, and to be comfortable with that, but also to make sure that mindset was brought upon my team so that they were not nervous about doing something that was at a high risk. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing that, and that was the only way we could deliver at a different level. So I think that was the most important thing. And then, to your point, I basically, was trying to accomplish a whole lot, and then you work in the long hours, and that starts to really wear on you. And I had to realize that certain deadlines were not going to be met, and it was okay to say they wouldn't be met for the longer term focus, which, it's the old adage, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and we need to be prepared for that.
Larry, I'm just going to add, there were just two quick things that happened really early in the pandemic that have really shaped how I've approached it. And one is my graduate school, they had all these quick seminars to help leaders on managing change. And there was this professor who came and said, for those with young kids, they're not going to remember this time in terms of what you did. They're going to remember this time in terms of how you showed up during this time. And that really struck me in terms of, how it's less about virtual learning. It's more about how the moments I'm really spending with them that are important, and that permeated into work. And the second thing, so I think of that constantly, is, because I was like, oh my God, these young kids and this virtual learning and Zoom, and it's so bad for their brain. And then I just realized that it's more about what's constant as a parent and how you're showing up. And the second thing is, very early in this, the CEO of Google Cloud called a quick meeting with me and his right-hand person. And he said, I am going to be very busy dealing with clients, dealing with a lot of other stuff. It was like our first COVID meeting. And he said, y'all are empowered to make decisions. And many of them will be right. You're going to using all the Google data, et cetera. And some of them won't. But you kind of have the backing. If something goes wrong, you should still make the decision. I'm more about the velocity and the decision than the decision being wrong. And that was very empowering. And that's how I felt with my team also. So we were kind of on the forefront with a lot of the different things going on, because Google Cloud has customers and, that are paying for services. We had to have support up and running. We didn't have laptops for people globally. A lot of things that just you would think a large company would have sorted. We didn't. But just the fact that someone empowers you and says, listen, everything's not going to be right, but as long as you go in with the data and the right intentions, I've got your back. And I think that's really important. And that's, I hope in some way I've tried to convey that to my team. You're not going to have all the answers, but make a decision, let's move forward, and you'll have your back. I'll have your back even if it doesn't work out. And I think that's back to, I think it's Carol Dweck, who talks a lot about this growth mindset. You're in here, you're learning. You have a purpose, but it's more about learning. This is having this fixed thing. This is what I've learned, and this is how I want to live my life. So I think those two things have really kind of guided my thinking through the pandemic, and I think going forward also.
Yeah, the power of a growth mindset. Yeah, very good. So I got one last question here. This is from Nina. One last question that we'll do before we transition, and it's about kids and children. And so her question is, being that a lot of parents are dealing with virtual school, lack of daycare, et cetera, are there any plans for Google, in parentheses REWS, to create some type of virtual childcare or virtual after-school activity hour for users that are facing that problem? I have some quick thoughts on this, but I wanted to turn it over to the panel first.
Larry, I was going to suggest you might be the best person to talk about this.
Yeah, I know a quick solution that we have, and Newton, I might need you to chime in as well. With our different digital offerings that we have that's out there, I know one thing that activity that we've been doing is a story time effort. I personally haven't attended it. My kids are on the other side of the spectrum. I just dropped off my youngest at college. So I'm actually more interested in Google's digital university that they just announced. I'm going to get my kids into that because it's cheaper, but it's a side note. But I know we have that opportunity going on. And then outside of that, if there's any others that may want to chime in either through the chat that are on, I can share that to the group. Or Newton, if you want to chime in.
If Gabe or Mike Tenarowitz are on the call, I think they might be best positioned to answer this. I know there's a lot of programming going on between our team, the Lifestyle Perks team, and others. And what we're trying to do now is consolidate some of that into like more combined, say, week-long experiences. So it looks like more like, a kids camp or something like that. But if either of them are available, I think they'd be able to speak to like the specifics and where we're at in the development process.
Yeah.
No?
I'm
Okay.
on. I don't have a ton of updates on the kids camp process. I'll say the kids story time is wildly popular, and we didn't realize how quickly it would kind of catch fire. It certainly wasn't marketed as a daycare option per se, more of a family time, and people are using it that way. Some people are using it where they'll sit over here and they'll do their work while the kids are able to engage in story time. But I think that turned the light on to the value around finding support in this sphere, and that's what sparked all the conversations and kind of investigations into the areas you're talking about, Newton, with putting on longer duration events and things like kids camp and all those types of things. But a lot still in the weeds on that development.
Got it. Great. And actually, Gabe just chimed in. So checking out REWS at Home. So there's some more things on there. And then Carrie Ann said that we have a family wellness month that starts in a few weeks. That's cool. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. It's a quick plug for that. Well, great. So we're going to go ahead and end the panel now. So definitely a big thank you to Relena, David, and Ennis just for your time, being able to take time out of your busy schedules. I know all of you are very busy. I've personally seen all of your calendars and see a lot going on. So we definitely appreciate your time to be able to come in and share. And now I'll pass it back over to you, Stuart.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. And thank you, everyone, for hanging with us on this. It's been a really wonderful morning. We have one final speaker for you who needs no introduction. So Michiel Bakker is with us. He's going to close us out this morning. And then when you're ready, Michael, if you're going to take some questions at the end, Larry, if you wouldn't mind coming back and helping us moderate some of those questions. And again, we can put them into the Dory, which is in your chat, or just drop them right into chat after Michael's done. So Michael, are you on? Everything good?
I am. Happy Tuesday to you all. So I guess, at least for us on the West Coast, I stand between you and lunch. And for all of us on the East Coast, obviously, it's already in the afternoon. Hope all of you are doing well. So for those of us over here on the West Coast, that the fires are subsiding and that all of you are actually safe, and that hopefully no houses have been impacted. Terrible, terrible situation from the fires, the air quality. You can go around the world these days. There is something happening which clearly is impacting how we're showing up. So I hope you're doing as well as you can, considering the circumstances. Stuart, thank you for inviting me to speak for a few minutes about change. And I would say I'm the last one to ask to speak about change. I'm just a practitioner like all of you, thrown into a very, rapidly evolving situation and trying to make the best out of it. If you would ask me what have I learned over the last 6 months about change and everything that comes with that, I think first and foremost, we are as a species incredible resilient and incredible creative. If you would replay the tape of our narrative at the beginning of the year, of all the things we said we would never, ever do, even think about, and what we subsequently did in February, March, and April, we figure it out. So when you think about change, I would say make a distinction between change that will find you, like this little virus, and then change that we can ponder about for days, weeks, a month about what we would do, how we should do it, and all that good stuff. First and foremost, we are capable of doing so much more, and that really has to do with, I think, believing in each other, believing in the team, and believing that, we'll figure it out as we get going. For me, it is really about ultimately having clarity about what it is you need to address, having trust in who you get to work with, and then getting out of the way. And I think when you are in charge of change, you have to accept that you have to actually make decisions, own decisions. You're going to be wrong multiple times, but not making the decision is quite often more wrong than just being wrong in doing. And I think when you work in an organization like we jointly work for, a broader ecosystem, trust that people are going to have your back, and that even when you miss something or you step on somebody's toes, or if you could do it again, you might do it slightly different, bigger, and better. The act of doing is truly the biggest act of change, because without doing, there is no change. When I think about what is coming our way, and I can tell you the story of how excited I am about the fall, the winter, and the spring, because you probably have picked up with me. I tend to enjoy change. So for me, this year has been truly, an interesting period of time where all kinds of things have changed. And setting aside the personal challenges, which I've gone through like everybody else, nobody is immune to the impact, the fatigue, and just the, at times, monotony of just being at the same screen every day, and where days just blur. I suffer from that as well. But at the same time, I really try as hard as I can to figure out from what can I do differently today, what can I learn, where can I make a difference, and to show up with that mindset, which is not easy. But somehow, some way, I probably am, maybe to an extent, gifted with that mindset, which helps me to get through the days, the weeks, and the months. So when I look at the fall and the winter and then the spring of 2021, I really see many more changes coming our way. And it's probably the diversity of where we're going to find ourselves at throughout the world that is going to bring more change. Thinking through, the different offices being at different levels. Taiwan, China are much further along than EMEA. EMEA is much further along than is in the US. Thinking through all of that, thinking through what will life be like post-COVID-19. So I am trying to ground myself in accepting that our world will continue to change at a rapid pace. Can change that. What I can change and where I can make a difference in, one, thinking through how I will show up myself as a leader and an individual, and how I can help the broader organization to be better equipped for change as well. So I'm thoroughly impressed that you're spending your time today on thinking through change management and learning from each other. You clearly don't learn change from just picking up a great book, which, I do every now and then as well. I think you really do it from listening to each other and valuing the insights and the input and the diversity of opinions from each other as well. So what you're doing today, I think, is so incredibly instrumental in driving, enabling, and facilitating change. I think core changes that are going to find REWS over the months to come is, one, in addition to what we're doing today, we're going to see, I think, a further diversification of what our clients are looking for. Cloud will probably ask for more and different things than maybe YouTube or search or devices and services. So as a services delivery organization, we have to think through how can we add more offerings to our offering box, and how can we subsequently enable our clients to customize from all the goodies that we have available for them. And then the third one is, how can we enable individuals to have personalized experiences with us? So far, we've done relatively well with that. And it's been fascinating to see how quickly different teams in my broader organization have been able to move both to the digital world, digital first, as well as thinking through who knew that the health and performance team would get involved in storytelling for kids. None of us would have believed it at the beginning of this year, but you've done that. So I think that we're going to see more of that going forward because, one, whether it's going to be for the remainder of the COVID period or post, many of us will be working from home a day or a couple of days per month post COVID-19 as well. So as a services organization, we really have to think through no longer what can we offer in a post-COVID world in the office environment, but what will we continue to offer at home and on the go. So many changes will be coming our way as well. My advice to you is, to an extent, embrace the change, because the change will find you. Build out your resilience. Really, really be mindful that this is not something that will pass by the end of October. This is going to be actually dragging on for a great number of quarters to come. And the way you show up as an individual, as a team leader, as the leader of the organization, really makes the difference for everybody who you interact with. So while we all want to be, and maybe we all are, superheroes, you're probably a bigger hero for your peers and for your team if you're well rested, if you have a positive outlook in life, and you can only do that if you really take good care of yourself, those who you live with, and people in your environment. So those will be my just practical tips, just based from doing it, not because I'm change management expert. Being mindful of time, Stuart, Larry, what easy questions do you have for me?
Great, and just a quick reminder to everybody, they can put questions on the story. I can get it started, Mike. I do have a question for you. And it has to do with what you can control versus what you cannot control. You touched on that a couple of moments ago. And I'm just curious to get your thoughts around practically how to do that or how to navigate that, what you can and cannot control.
I think for me, it's a mindset. So, I am just as susceptible to all kinds of signals and to be quick with the response, moody, sometimes deflated, and sometimes extraordinarily excited as well, because it works two ways. But then I just try to figure out if it's something I cannot control and it just happens to me, I'll just deal with it. And I really want to focus on, one, might I be able to change the context so you can become a little bit more part of the solution or part of the context versus just stuff finding you. And I think it has to do with resilience. So I just know after just a day of just looking at the screen, I am probably less at my best at 4 o'clock in the afternoon than I might be at my best at 6 o'clock in the morning. And just finding actually times, for example, to break. I loved to walk and to hike. So I deliberately built in time during the day just to go for the same round around the block over and over and over again. But still, it's better. And therefore, it just makes it easier to deal with the things I don't control. And I accept as well that all of us ultimately play a role in a broader ecosystem. When Jen gets under my skin, or David, or Ruth, it's not because they're just bad people or they're asking stupid questions. They are ultimately part of an ecosystem that is being asked to do stuff as well. And the moment I accept that, then I understand, I wish she didn't ask me that question because whatever I think, but I pause, I don't respond, I go for my round around the block, and I show up and say my role is to make her successful. She asked me a question, and I'm going to deliver on that. It's not always easy, Larry, and I have my weaker moments as well. Trust me. And sometimes Newton finds that or experiences that or others. It just happens. I'm just as human like everybody else.
Got it. That's great. I definitely relate to that. For me, it's going to go shoot foul shots. My little escape to come back. Yeah. So, quick question here from Kenneth Campos. It's a book question. So this is a good one for you. What are the top 2 to 3 books on change management or leading during adversity? And then it's a 2-part question. What are the 1 or 2 top of mind lessons you gleaned from these resources?
So I always jokingly say John Cotter is a good friend of mine, or I'm a good friend of him. He's written a variety of actually very good books about change management. And what I've learned is that I don't think John has all the answers. So John has written all kinds of good books, and I think an interesting one I really like is Accelerate, because it really deals with, you can deal with a lot of challenges in a project structure, and therefore you can actually create or have two structures concurrently, your regular organization and a temporary project structure that has a beginning and the end. And I think we're seeing it really with, for example, our RTO project structure. It's really actually a good example of how you can actually have two different formats work concurrently. But what I think I've learned with John is that change management is just not something that just happens. You can use a variety of frameworks, you can use a variety of actually models. And I think the more you learn about different approaches, I think the easier it becomes to figure out from what might work over here. So I've, over the years, really enjoyed his books. Accelerate is one of them as well. And then I think the other one, which I think is different from, let me see if I have it over here with me. No, I don't have it readily. Is actually thinking about green swans. So there was a book in 2008 about black swans. There's an interesting one now out there about green swans, which I found really, really interesting as well to think through. From was COVID-19 a black swan? Just something that we all missed because we were so engulfed in what it is. But it was another one. So it's not necessarily a from how do you practice change management 101, but really much more to think through from how can you pick up on signals and how do you deal with ultimately the opportunities. So the other one I think through, for example, it's a broader answer. I see this period of time actually as an incredible accelerator of all the changes that were coming our way in the 20s anyway. We just got them in the first 10 weeks of 2020. And maybe we're going to be done with change for the remainder of the 20s. And therefore, it remains going to be really, really easy. I'm not sure it's going to happen.
That would be amazing if all the change for the decade just happened now and then we're good to go. We will see about that. Great. So yeah, so this is all the questions that we have for you, Michael. So I'm gonna, before I pass back over to Stuart, definitely wanted to thank you again for your time with us. So Stuart, back to you.
And maybe before I go back to Stuart, thank you for everything that you do. I get to see what probably many of you love every week, snippets, quarterly snippets. Is when you bring them all together and when you get to see on a weekly basis what everything is doing. It is awesome. And it happens because of you. It just doesn't happen because I like to say magic, it just happens. That isn't the case. So I'm thoroughly impressed by and grateful for what all of you do on a daily, weekly basis, especially under today's circumstances. So thank you. Stuart, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And thank you to all of our participants today. Larry Green for moderating so much of today, our REWS panelists, Newton and Jonathan for hosting, and of course, Brent Gleeson was fantastic. So this has been wonderful. We'll look forward to seeing you back next week, September 8th, to hear Dr. John Nagel. That's going to be part 2 of our Change Management Summit. It'll be in the afternoon. Again, if you need an invite, please feel free to reach out to me. We'll get you one right away. It'll be in the afternoon, September 8th, West Coast time. We'll also have a short feedback form that you'll be getting for today. Appreciate your time on that in advance. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And thanks for joining us at today's Change Management Summit. Bye now.